soft belly meditation can help you at least free up a few seconds of quiet mind, so you know what it feels like.
I like the sound of that soft belly meditation.
Yeah. So
Makes me think of soft shell crab.
Noah Levine, Against the Stream. It's kind of like a autobiography / instructional on what soft belly meditation is, the benefits of it. Yeah, Noah Levine was a very angsty, like gutter punk type dude that was institutionalized many times, and I guess it was his father who was into, or his stepfather who was into it. And it's like, well, what do you know, old man? I don't want to. But then finally, when he was institutionalized and he couldn't kill himself by running his head into the other side of the room because it was too short, he just got to the point where he's like, okay, well, I got to do something. And the idea is when you breathe in with your belly, you count 1, and then you breathe out and you count 2 up to 10. Mm-hmm. And if you think about anything else, you start back at 1. If you forget what number you're on, you start back at 1. And he said, he didn't get off of 1 for the longest time. But once he finally got that pure moment of 1 in one breath, it was just mind-opening. Just a moment of quiet.
Everything melt away, and it's just the present moment. Yeah. That's a great way of putting that, because that's exactly what you're doing when you meditate.
Yeah.
Bringing yourself back to the sense of this very present moment, without any of the mental detail that the mind makes around it, the way the mind chatters to itself, just the actual feeling of this moment. It's such a familiar feeling. You recognize it instantly. You're like, oh, that? Yeah, of course. I've always known that's there. And it's just the feeling of being alive. Mm-hmm. But that is actually a depthless feeling that you can really go deeply into the more that you abide in that state. As that state, that presence pervades, and it's a beautiful thing. So we all have access to that, but it is very difficult to stay into. So there's that technique whenever you notice the mind wandering, to take a Zen step back.
And that's where the breathing and counting work in this.
Because people think meditation is trying to stop the thoughts. You got to stop your thoughts to be able to meditate. No, your thoughts are going to come and go. Hundreds or thousands of thoughts are going to come up during any normal meditation routine. The thing that you do is just notice them with a kind of detached, non-offended kind of awareness. You don't have to be mad at yourself. You don't have to judge yourself. You just, I was thinking again. You just notice thinking, and then you come back to the moment.
It's kind of like,
so it's like doing the reps of any kind of exercise. That's the reps of meditation. The more that you return back to presence, the better you get at abiding in it, and you get these brief, like you were saying, these brief little moments where you feel it, and it's like, that's awesome. It's like this ultimate relaxation, and this sense of even oneness can occur through that.
Yeah.
And you can lengthen that. But even 1 single second is already such a beautiful coming back to home. It's there for us all.
And I think it may have been Krishnamurti who created the image of like viewing them like clouds, or maybe it was during the time that I was reading Krishnamurti, and somebody else said it, but like in the meditative state, your thoughts are going to come up, your feelings are going to come up, but it's like watching clouds go by.
Yeah, let them be like benign phenomena, like clouds. It's just clouds or leaves in the water going by.
And if one's bugging you particularly, it's kind of like when you look at a cloud for long enough, you can watch it dissipate. You can do that with your thought too.
Yeah.
Observe it from a distance, focusing on it like it's, I don't want to say something exterior from you, but something that is, well,
just another part of the environment, just another aspect of phenomena that's occurring in your awareness. Yeah. We're still live on YouTube. Cool. We're live on Twitch, guys. And, YouTube and Twitch secondarily are the places that we're growing. So, it is what it is. But, yeah, we'd love for you guys to follow us on social media. Actuali is on Twitter. It's on Facebook. And it's on Instagram. And we're letting TikTok just do its thing on its own. I'm not interested in having CCP spyware on my phone.
Yeah, or participating in a mechanism that is actively destructive to people's physical, mental, and spiritual health. I ain't down.
In the nation that's got more slaves alive working today than any other country.
Well, between China and Africa, that's where most of the slaves, as far as the things being made or extracted, are at. And also China has a lot of factories and control in Africa, so,
fun times.
Yeah, people talk about, colonialism bad and all that stuff, but they won't say nothing about, like Japanese colonialism, or even now still French colonialism with their monetary system. Forget who it was, but the woman in France, everybody thinks she's far right and everything, but she, I can't remember her name, but she sat there and, busted out a photo of a kid in a cobalt mine and was like, and pulled out the money and was like, yeah, this is what we trade them, and we take half of their value. you know, because France doesn't have gold, or it wasn't a cobalt mine, it was a gold mine. France doesn't have really like gold in their own ground, like some, but not enough for like they're number like 3 or 4 on nations who have a gold reserve, but they get their gold from extraction from other places. So doesn't mean they're evil or whatever. It just means people need to start paying attention to what is actually real, opposed to what is salient and makes you feel. You know, because the little kids in cobalt and gold mines aren't really salient because you don't see them on the news all the time. You don't see them in the TV. You don't see them all the time.
Yeah,
but it's very real.
By salient, we mean what's most pronounced to you in your awareness. So, like the loudest voices or the glitziest graphics or things like that are going to become very salient for us. And right now, most people, it seems, especially if you're watching any of the legacy mainstream corporate media, CNN, ABC, NBC, Fox, or any of those, you're going to be seeing a certain narrative. And, you know, we should take the advice of Buddha when he said, don't believe anything just because many people believe it and it seems to be true. Don't believe anything just because your authorities, your parents, your teachers, your elders, or your gurus say it's true. He says, then don't even believe anything just because I, as Buddha, say it's true. Only after careful investigation and finding it to be good and true for one and all, accept it and live up to it. Because we are often we're often easily lied to.
You are given eyes to read and see, ears to hear and listen, a heart to set your moral standings, and a mind to reason out where all that is. And you should use all of them. I had to have this conversation. I was talking to somebody about this, and I got the whole like, you don't know what a revolution or a civil war is like. And I had to be like, well, neither do you, because neither of us were alive when, say like our civil war and as far as America and our revolution happened. No one was alive for that, but you have eyes to read and to, in the case of back then, to read, because you don't see like we do now with video. You got ears to listen to people who are either, experts in it or went through, say, like the communist revolution and telling their story. I have a heart that tells me what's right and what's wrong morally, and I have a mind to reason everything out to make sure that my heart, what I see with my eyes and hear with my ears, is grounded in any sort of fact.
Yes.
So
that's good. We need all working in tandem to be able to see clearly and reliably, and be willing to check ourselves. Like there's no judgment here. It's okay to be wrong. I want to find out everywhere that I'm wrong. I'm excited when I find out that I was wrong about something at this point, because now I'm closer to what is good and true for one and all once again, and that's all that really matters. Like if we can care more for finding out what is right than being right, then I think we're on the right track, and things become less offensive overall.
All right,
it's all right when we're wrong.
Last week's episode, we started out with Otto, and he said, before moral interpretation, there is an experience of the numinous. And from the week previous, the numinous is we're using that word to substitute for holy, because holy has some meanings that are not necessarily pertinent and useful to what we're talking about now. So the numinous. And sacredness is part of the experience of the numinous. There's the aspect of mystery. So it's fascinating, so super salient and, horrifying. And we get into talking about what horror actually is, not like what most movies will have you, where it's like, you see somebody, eviscerated and their guts all over the ground, kind of stuff. That's not horror. That's just shock and gross.
It's much
they're just
deeper
startling,
than that. Yeah, it's not fear. It's more like insanity or madness.
Yeah.
When the ground is completely pulled, the ground of reality is completely pulled out from underneath you. So when you talked about what was the first term that you just brought up?
Numinous.
Numinous. Yes.
Numinous.
Yes. This is the pre-moral notion of sacredness. So this is just sacredness itself. So we move into the numinous, the mystery. And let's get on here. So we had...
so the definition of horror that Vervaeke gave us is horror is when your sense of contact with reality is being changed.
Being undermined, yes. So we're not talking about the fear of predation or something that startles you or grosses you out, like you were saying. But when the ground of reality is being ripped out from underneath you.
Yeah.
And so monsters, when they're depicted in movies, they can be intercategorical on a continuum, and this is when they really trip us up the most, like they freak us out the most or horrify us the most. They don't fall into ready-made categories. We have these ways of categorizing. We have patterns that we come to understand, and when they're broken, they challenge our grip on reality. So you have these like Wolfman or a ghost, which is like transition between live and dead.
Or even like creatures that are like half one thing and half the other. Like you're like, oh, like, a minotaur, how's that scary? But like, back when our collective psyche or our, I don't know what to call it, so I'll call it collective psyche, was simpler and had less examples of horrifying things, like, a man creature with the head of a bull would be terrifying, because it breaks these normal patterns. So it is what they call it intercategorical.
Vampires would be, zombies would be.
Yeah, and so the morphology is different. Like, so like, the habitat or the location, so like seeing like a fish, like what is it, snakehead, where the fish are on land and attacking people. Oh no, or
the
Sharknado.
Really good one is Medusa.
Yeah,
Medusa's freaky, man. I mean, she's got like a snake body, but she's got like a human torso, and then she's got, depending on how she's depicted, and then she's got the woman's head with snakes for hair. And one thing that guys know is that a woman can stun you.
Yeah. Turn you to stone.
And even, totally turn you into stone. So that's cool how we play with metaphor. And we get into that. We got into that a lot in this last episode.
We also talked briefly about, what makes things unclean. So when either the habitat or the locomotion of a creature doesn't fall into pre-made categories, that's where unclean. That's the I forget the woman who stated that because I didn't get a chance to write it down, but
they're incongruent with what what we're used to, is like how we experience things, and how that the normal way we experience things, when we run into something that we can't categorize, it causes us to lose that grip on reality.
So if you go too far, then the monster induces horror, and the fact that the monster is intercategorical points to the madness. The losing your grip. It's like this human shouldn't have snake features. It's like, and he mentioned The Shining. Particularly when he's locked in the storeroom, and the voices are talking in his head, and you're like, okay, crazy dude going into his own madness. But then the door opens up, and then you're like, wait. It's not just him mad. Okay, is this place actually, like, what's going on? That's
where it really disrupts your sense of reality. Yeah, because the whole time you're seeing Jack drink more and more and more, and he's losing his sense of reality. And what you think you're seeing is just some guy that's drinking himself into oblivion, and he's going mad, and he's seeing and believing things that aren't there. So once he's trapped in the storeroom, when his wife traps him in there because he's acting crazy. Yeah.
And now
he hears the voice that says, okay, it's time. Now we're going to open the door for you. And suddenly the door opens, and now you're like, wait a minute. This isn't just the story of a guy going crazy. This is like a ghost story. Something else. This place must be really be haunted. And then you experience a real sense of horror. Chills go up your spine.
Yeah, so at that point in time, the viewer is now participating in the protagonist's madness, or in the whole madness of the situation. Yes. So the numinous is super salient and horrible. And he gave the example of like watching.
It can be horrible.
Yeah, like seeing a.
The numinous can be beautiful too,
but like
it can be awesome or it can be awful.
Yeah. And so like, when you see a wreck on the side of the road and you're rubbernecking and try to check it out because you want to see something that's dead to understand the mysteries of death, but seeing death, you can't see its mysteries. You just see a dead body.
The numinous draws you in, and you can't help but look. That's why people are rubbernecking, because I don't know, we're drawn in by that stuff that's horrifying. And it is, like you said, the threat of death is something that we're seeking to understand. And that's why we're drawn to it, even though it freaks us out.
So even the numinous, since it's pre-moral, if you will, experience.
Pre-moral, yes.
It definitely does have a horrifying, like, even if you're confronting a loving God, like, or getting the experience of that, because, like, remember,
and that's what I mean. It's both. It's not just horror.
Yeah,
though.
yeah.
We got to remember
Well,
people know this is also there's a beautiful side. There's an awesome side to this, but awe itself is telling you. Awe is pointing to what the numinous means. It can be overwhelmingly beautiful. It can be overwhelmingly terrifying or horrifying.
Well, when
awful or awesome. And both at once.
When Paul, before he was Saul, had that experience where, you know, he was knocked flat on his behind and, you know, heard God in his head and, you know, basically like, why are you persecuting me and messing with me? That was a horrifying experience for him. It was all inspiring and it was fascinating, the experience, but it drastically changed his view of the world. First off, you don't hear things in your head.
Yeah, seriously disrupted.
Second off, this guy that's supposed to be the enemy that I'm supposed to take out is actually a very impactful person that I'm going to end up having to, you know, follow, and then finding out it's helping me, and then you're breaking all of your, you know, preconceived notions about how things are. And just because it's horrifying doesn't necessarily also mean it's like morbid and gross either.
Yeah.
You know, like the example in The Shining when
it's just very
the door
disruptive.
opens.
Overpowering.
And you know, it is. I would have to say this experience of being horrified. You can probably look at it as like a self-organizing criticality too. When it breaks, the horrifyingness helps break it down, and then you can build up again, and then it breaks down and it humbles you. You know, it's humiliating as in humbling as in,
so there's definitely a yin yang aspects to the numinous. So what we've been speaking through on horror and how it can give us a grip on the mystery of death. So we know of that flow itself allows things to be super salient. So when we're not getting a purchase on something, we're not deeply coupled with reality, then one aspect of the experience of the numinous is to feel that horror.
And that flow, so the fascinating and super salient end of this mystery, the flow that you get in that is not like a normal flow state.
Oh, that's what that was.
Like you get when you're doing something where things are coming together and you're getting to understand. It's a shadow of flow that's
it's like a shadow
spiraling,
flow.
And you're trying to get what you can't get at either.
So this is similar to like a dark aspect of the flow state almost.
Yeah.
When you have that horrifying experience. And so we know that we're told to fear God or have awe of God. Perhaps is what that is pointing to more precisely. To have awe for
not
God.
Being afraid of God, but like, you know, well, in a certain sense,
it's natural to fear something that you are so deeply awed and overwhelmed by.
Yeah.
So an experience of the sacred, or experience of sacredness, can teach us to.
Taking us to the edge of our ability to reason and understand, and demands change.
Takes us to the boundary of awe and horror, where we experience a demand to change who and what we are. There it is. Okay.
And the realization that we are ultimately limited as well. So you're confronting your limitations as well as a demand to change.
Right. Realization that we are limited, no matter how much we grow. So it's not only to inspire growth, but to know that we are also mortal.
Yeah, it keeps us from getting a big head too. You know, it's self-inflation, I think, is the word he used.
Yeah, it takes our framing to the very limits while also allowing us to acknowledge our limits. So it humiliates us. Awe, the awful, the awesome, horror, the overwhelming beauty can humiliate us in the most positive sense, in the sense that it's bringing us into a deep sense of humble recognition. So we're looking at the positive sense of humiliation, the humbling recognition, the sati kind of remembering of the being mode, a deep recognition of our limits that helps prevent inflation of our egos, from thinking that we are more than we can be. So this protects us from thinking that you can jump off a building and fly.
It's not just unpleasant for the sake of being unpleasant. It's unpleasant because in order for us, the human psyche to grow, we have to have to grow healthily and at the proper rate. Right? I don't want to say proper rate, but at the optimal rate. We have to be, we have to be shown that we are limited.
Yes.
Exactly where our limitations are.
Yeah, you want to try and stretch too far beyond your limits such that you kill yourself. And that's why when you look over the edge of a building, especially if you're afraid of heights and you're really high up, you look over. That is a horrifying experience. That's a super unsettling experience.
Too tall.
And for a reason. It's for a reason. It's humbling you. It's helping you prevent yourself from thinking that you could actually survive jumping off that and flapping your arms really fast.
So, in sacredness, there's two ends of sacredness, the numinous that we were just talking about, but then worldview attunement, which homes us. So it's this numinous experience that blows our mind, and then reattuning our world view and homing, satiing, the terrible Englishing of words.
And when we say home, we mean HOME.
Yes,
like
home.
It's giving you a home. It's
like
bringing
a place
you
to
back home.
be.
So it homes us, protects us, secures us against horror.
So the
sacredness allows us to tune our worldview more precisely to upgrade our frames of perception. That's what we mean by worldview attunement.
Yeah, so the worldview attunement is meta-assimilation, and the numinous is meta-accommodation.
Yes.
So it's creating accommodation that then could be assimilated in their...
an opponent processing.
Yes. Yeah.
And the opponent processing is how we calibrate and how we focus and improve our framing of reality. Really.
And Vervaeke is making the argument that this is a higher order RR, so relevance realization. Yeah. So sacredness is a higher order of relevance realization, higher than just our normal everyday, this is a cup. It can hold things in it. It can also catch the bug. It can,
Yes. This is relevant to me right now because I'm thirsty.
Yeah.
So my brain knows to bring it to the forefront of my awareness so that I can then go and grab it.
But if it's empty and you're in a car on a highway in a traffic jam and you have to pee, now it's a place to pee.
Right.
That's the lower level.
And if I look
relevance.
to it and it's empty and I'm thirsty, I know I can't drink out of that.
Yeah.
So relevance realization, your brain is constantly doing this all the time. There's a higher order of relevance realization, which is how we attune ourselves, our worldview, through recognition of the sacredness around us. Mm-hmm. This is where this whole work that Vervaeke is doing gets particularly trippy. He's proving the value and the actuality of sacredness to the human brain and body.
And so he talked about music a bit. So music is not about anything in particular. It's us playing with the machinery of RR just for the sake of it. Mm-hmm. Playing with the machinery of making, finding what is relevant.
Yes.
And
because it connects us to the world and to each other. Somehow,
sure.
Yeah.
Well,
it's not necessary. It's not even music itself isn't even necessarily about anything specific. Sometimes lyrics are, of course, but the music itself is doing something more than that, something deeper than that, right?
Well, what is that Pachelbel's canon in D that they play at every graduation? Mm-hmm. It's not actually about graduating, but it gives you a feeling of ascension, uplifting, moving from one state to another. So it's
the end of something
playing
too.
with how you and kind of the bittersweet ending of something else. And that progression is used in every 90s song that was played in any made for high school students going into college movie. You'll hear that in the soft punk songs and stuff like that. You'll hear that dun 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 dun. Dun, dun, you can go so
there it is.
But when you're playing the music, your brain is shifting around to what is relevant within it, and these, I'm not going to get too music nerdy on you, but the moving from one chord to the next chord and how it wraps around and everything leads you through a pathway of relevance. At one moment you've got one motion happening, but then it moves and you're moving into another thing, and you can apply your own reasoning to it as well.
And the music will solve itself too, so you'll be feeling an emotion and then another emotion, then there's this thing that brings it all together and it makes sense somehow, and that's a culmination of the emotion.
And sometimes it's ineffable as well, because it's I can't really explain how this makes me feel,
but I like it.
it's not quite happy, and it's not quite melancholy, and it's not what, like whatever your descriptors
so music
are.
itself, it's not necessarily about anything in particular, yet life is a mistake without it.
Yeah, for sure.
As I think that was Nietzsche that said that. Vervaeke was quoting there. So,
and
due to the meaning crisis, we can notice the degree to which we've trivialized music, and our connection to music.
Ever wonder why very little music is actually like good anymore, other than just being popular? Or oh, she said it, It's like, now, mind you, there's still great music, but what is popularly consumed, and this is what we're talking about, the most amount of people would like nowadays, what's popularly consumed, even in like, you can hear it in commercials. It's, that synthetic hi-hat beat and, slightly urban whatever, but it's been so commercialized that it has no cultural anything in it. It's just the hollow shell of a previous style of music that was popular maybe like 5 years ago.
They know that this hits certain buttons in people's brains.
And it reminds
this
them,
reliably worked before, so let's do this again.
Let's do it again, just with another style of music that is even less melodic than what we're using. Because like we don't really have too many jingles anymore. Like we used to say like sell things with jingles, and like it or not, jingles had really good hooks, like really good hooks. Like that. And back in that point in time when marching band music and other stuff was more active.
Nothing but jingles back then. We still have a few of them, but there's not as many.
My Baloney has a first time.
I mean, there's
or Meow Mix song. Meow 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 meow. Those note breakdowns are actually pretty sophisticated in how it moves around and how it hits your brain. But now it's
making an interesting mathematical shape as it goes through the dun dun dun.
That you don't necessarily actively notice, but your brain grabs onto. And then their music now is just and it's just like.
Which is good sometimes, but if it's all like that and there's very little variation.
Hey, don't get me wrong. I'm a percussionist. I love rhythm, but
maybe we could be doing better than that.
Yeah.
So
it was cool when it came out.
Yeah, I mean, I still think a lot of it can be cool, but where is the imagination?
Yeah.
Don't just do a complete imitation with a few little changes. I mean, then that's we're getting a lot of nowadays is replication in the mainstream.
Yeah.
So, but music, okay, let's get back. So it's not about anything necessarily.
Yeah.
It's just for its own sake. And it's a pivotal way for us to represent the sacred. That underlying geometry of the universe is somehow being depicted in music, and music seems to be the highest of the arts for that reason. It's closest to the underlying nature of reality. Jordan Peterson speaks on this very well. He's got several different talks he's done on music. So music evokes the being mode. It brings us, it homes us. It brings us back home to the present moment. That's why we like it so much. That's why we're so addicted to it. That's why it helps us feel better when we're low, or it speaks for us so well.
Or it can give us a familiar sense of nostalgia.
Yes.
That, can rehome us, say, like in a place, like much like a smell does.
That's the perspectival mode. And then it also can bring us into that participatory mode of interaction and sense of beingness with the world. So there's deep transformation of our agent and arena relations available through music. And now we turn to the symbol.
The symbol and the sign.
And the sign, yes.
I'm going to explain.
There's an important differentiation between the two.
I'm going to start with the sign real quick because it's pretty simple. But the sign, like the heart shape, is a non-exemplary reference. So you see that shape of the heart. That's not an example of either the human heart or love. It's just a symbol or a sign that we use to refer. Whereas the symbol, puts things together in reference by participation?
Yes.
So like a
kiss.
A kiss is a symbol that shows that actually is the example of two people coming together in a very trusting manner. Also, getting over the things we don't like about the other person, like your breath smells like garlic because you just ate some hummus, but I'm going to kiss you anyway because I love you, and we're showing this.
It's serious, but it's playful.
Yeah,
you're participating in a reciprocal relation with another human, and we're remembering the being mode together. And then he also spoke of liberty at some point. I don't know if we're there yet.
But
that's a powerful symbol.
Yeah,
like
sure.
Lady Liberty.
We use Lady Liberty as a symbol to. That's when he was talking about using metaphor as a placeholder.
Mm-hmm. And then there's also that French statue or painting. She's like holding scales of justice, and that helps you visualize and then think to yourself about what that means. And so that's the reciprocal relation that symbols do for us. It's like you understand it by becoming involved in the symbol, with the symbol itself.
Yeah, and
so symbols that have at core deep metaphor.
Yes.
And metaphor means to carry over.
Yeah.
We look through metaphors to see differently. They help us see things differently. They give us an insight. We know that metaphors, of course, are pervasive and profound in our language. In fact, every single sentence that we speak at all times is loaded with metaphors. I just said the word loaded. And so that's how pervasive and profound they are. We don't realize how much reality is structured and saturated by metaphor. And we're constantly involved in this inter-essay with the meanings of words and so when something's interesting, that you're in an inter-essay with it.
Mm-hmm. So we talked about so
we're constantly we're looking through one thing to be able to understand another thing, and this is how we speak to each other, so that you can get closer to my point of view and where I'm coming from. I'm using metaphors so that you can do that.
Yeah. And there are limitations and constraints within metaphorical projection, and like he mentioned, like you can attack somebody's argument, but you can also attack the castle walls. Attacking the castle walls is a better metaphor. Well, you're literally attacking the castle walls. And so you're using it as a metaphor for the argument. People are like, well, that's violent. It's like, okay, I can criticize your argument, but I can't criticize the castle walls or something like that.
Yeah, what he's saying is it's funny how we can say, someone can attack your argument. Yeah. But, and you can also say, but you can also attack castle walls. But it sounds weird if you say, now you could say, I assaulted the castle walls. We assaulted the castle walls. But it sounds weird if you say, someone assaulted my argument. That doesn't make sense. Someone attacked my argument. Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So this is where the metaphors get slippery for some reason.
And projection is not enough.
That's right.
That's the thing. So the way we use and understand metaphor is not just straight 1 to 2 projection. Mm-hmm. There's little something more in there.
It's like a fine tuning, like. A certain word in a certain context used as a metaphor compare in just such a way that it gives you a little bit more fine-tuned understand what that person means. Mm-hmm. So that's why attacked my argument can make sense in the terms of argument, because it is like I'm arguing an idea that I hold valuable. And if somebody is dismissing it, then I could be offended by that. It can feel like a personal affront or like a personal attack. Yes. So in that context, the word attack suddenly makes sense.
And maybe that also points to why, when using metaphor, we do have to be careful with our metaphors too, because like were you feeling assaulted or were you feeling personally attacked? Mm-hmm. Like there's a difference, because if you're feeling personally assaulted, I'm imagining somebody's like beating the crap out of you, where it's like I felt attacked, which means they were coming at you with words and picking you apart, which is a totally different thing. Whereas like I felt assaulted, as in like, did he grab your butt, your breasts? Like that's a totally different mind state. So we have to be
when someone attacks your ideas, you are not being physically attacked. Of course, people like to equate that as such
but
today.
Metaphor is beyond projection. Symbols make us make use of a profound metaphor to hold ideas in the mind. So that's where where the symbol of like Lady Liberty is allowing us to hold a complex concept such as liberty in our mind in a way so that we can re-reference it and get a better understanding.
Yes, we get an inter-essay with it. And
even Medusa, the monster Medusa, is a symbol to represent many things. Mm-hmm. Not just a monster that needs to be conquered so the hero can go through his tasks and become the hero he's supposed to. The reason why we have different monsters is they're stand-in symbols for things like
different aspects of us and humanity. Like you have the wise king, but you can also have the evil king.
Yeah.
And you can also have the evil aspects of the feminine, which was well depicted in Medusa.
Or even like Lilith, the word lullaby is.
What was the name of the queen in Little Mermaid? That's another good one.
That was Ursula.
Ursula, yeah.
But like say lullaby is Lilith Abi, which is Lilith be at bay, and we'd sing it to kids because Lilith was the symbol for everything that happened bad to your kids in the night, like babies, like instant infant death, which used to happen a lot more than it does now, and it still happens where the baby just stops breathing out of nowhere and dies in the crib. Well, it must be something. It's the general evils of whatever we don't understand in a symbol.
Yeah,
because we can also use symbols as placeholders,
stand-ins,
for things we don't understand, like say like in math.
Well said.
You have your X, solve for X. You don't know what X is yet, but you can use it as a placeholder and move it around long enough to eventually get X.
And we're talking about all of this because Vervaeke, at this point in the series, is seeking a dynamic account of metaphors, what they are. And
wordless possession of the idea or concept. That's a great way. Great thing you said there. Yeah, not having to have the word, because the word is just is also a stand-in, but not as descript as say a proper metaphorical symbol. And you could take this as like a painting too. What is it? Hieronymus Bosch.
Yes.
All of his paintings are deeply encoded metaphorical story. It's not even just stories, but he does religious stuff. So you can see the whole story of pre-Adam and Eve into Adam and Eve, and then Adam and Eve leaving the garden, and then the hellscape of humanity, and stuff like that through these images that it's like, well, it doesn't really make sense that guy's bent over and has flowers coming out of his bum, and some other guy's going over here while there's this weird monster thing eating things, but everybody's climbing into its mouth, directly. That doesn't make any sense. But I also think he was kind of a Gnostic hereticist as well. So he's encoding much deeper things than what you get at the normal surface level of that looks unpleasant. That's hell.
Yep.
Well, if you go deeper and you're in the know of whatever, school of, thought and practice or whatever that he was in, then you can look and you can see more in there. And then you can see more depending on the symbol.
You just reminded me that there was a great show, like detective show on Amazon Prime called Bosch, and the character, the detective in that show, was named after Hieronymus Bosch. And there's some really interesting interweaving of elements in that series that seem like they could be drawing from some of the themes of Hieronymus Bosch's art.
So we're gonna, for the last little bit of this, it's the brain as a self-exapting machine.
Yes.
And our cerebellum, which takes in all of our various senses.
And helps
us
us doing
balance.
With metaphors. We're exacting. Yes, they're more than just projecting an idea. We're exacting them.
Yeah.
It's a circuit reuse, like reusing circuits of the brain to do something else. So like the fact that we have tongues that are good for moving food around in our mouth so we can chew on it more easily, and testing foods for poison by taste. The brain was able to exact the part of itself devoted to doing all that into the actual process of making speech. So now we're also using the moving around of our tongue to hit different parts of our mouth to make consonants and vowels, sounds, and all that.
If I gather what Vervaeke's really trying to get into here is, using the balancing nature of the cerebellum and the brain to make reason, or or relevance realization and reasoning and meaning making. So we're exacting the balancing nature of our own brain and through all of our senses into a higher.
That one just hit me even deeper than it did last episode, as you said that. That's awesome. Yes, so we recognized in our last episode that the cerebellum evolved for central balance, and what the cerebellum is doing is picking up on our different senses, our visual field. It's picking up on what we're hearing around us and how the world feels around us by the sense of touch, and it's further refining all of that information and helping it flow together so that it can just further improve and optimize our sense of balance and our sense of ability to move in the world and maintain balance. So we can exact this part of our brain that is designed for deep coordination between many different parts of the brain to master the practice of, as DJ was just saying, utilizing our relevance realization in an embodied sense. And
basically balancing, balancing our various opponent processes, as well as keeping us from going into parasitic processing with our heuristics, but so allows us to balance our heuristics to not fall into parasitic processing, which would be the negative end of heuristic usage that your brain just naturally does when you're in a spiral and you can't get out, that kind of thing. So just basically finding balance, the optimal path through our problem space, ideally, because it comes down to problem spaces. This mystery that we're trying to find in the numinous, or trying to solve in the numinous, is a problem space as well. And we're the problem is this is breaking my frame of reality. And it's very fascinating at the same time.
But there's so many variables at once. Well, I can use my cerebellum. I already have a part of my brain that is dedicated to dealing with complex interactions and the different contingencies that can come about as a result of these multiple variables interplaying at once. Just like when the cerebellum helps maintain and optimize our balance, we can use the cerebellum. We can exact this part of our brain to help balance our sense of being and homing ourselves against horror and recognizing relevance and catching ourselves from falling victim to bullshit and self-deception and all that good stuff. Yes.
Yeah. So basically, he used the term higher order relevance realization. Well, this is higher order balancing, if you will.
Yes.
And all balancing is basically optimization, because balance isn't always necessarily equal on both sides and completely flat. Balance can be a dynamic movement. Like as you're moving around, your body might be like this and your head might be like this, and that feels like when you're on a swing, you're still balancing on the swing, even though everything's shifting.
That's right.
Well, that's also why it's fun, because you feel that and your body has to
so the
adapt
cerebellum
to
is like the part that just optimizes that. That whole process, because of course you have the inner ear, but that's just a little bit of it. Your visual fields moving
what you're
around,
seeing,
and what you're seeing and what you're hearing around you, is all these things are important coming into how we maintain the sense of balance. So to hold in mind, then look back through an idea, that a metaphor, to gain further insight, we can use that capacity exacted for higher order relevance realization. And that is where we left off last episode.
That's the end of my notes.
Right. Oh.
All right. Good thing I listened to that last episode twice today, so I could actually make sense of my notes.
Yeah, that really helped clarify for me. I'm glad we're actually tracking so far.
Yeah, and it's not completely
been a long
lost.
road, and I know I've made a lot of mistakes in my understanding. I'm so sorry, Vervaeke, for butchering any of your great work here. But we're in, like we've told you guys before, we're not sages or gurus or like experienced teachers here. We're literally fellow students, just your fellow upright, walking, talking, gum chewing hominids here, trying to figure out the meaning crisis together along with you. And we're very happy to have you guys joining us on this, because it takes a lot of minds working together to be able to help solve a high-level crisis such as the one that our species finds itself in now. So welcome to the learning journey. Thank you guys for growing with us, and let's jump on in. I think it's about that time.
Yeah.
This is episode 35 of John Vervaeke's Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. This episode is on the symbol, sacredness, and the sacred. So I guess there's going to be a distinction there between sacredness and the sacred that Vervaeke is going to further elucidate. All right, y'all, here we go.
Welcome back to Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. Last time we were continuing our exploration of sacredness, and I talked about that in contrast, but also in concert with Geertz's notion of sacredness as homing us against horror. We have the proposal from Otto that sacredness puts us into contact with the numinous, which basically exposes us to what is horrifying at least the limits of us, because it has an aspect of awe with a little bit more, which is, right, to remind us, humiliation in the original sense of the word, to keep us, to give us humility, to remember that as we are feeling that sense of expansiveness with awe, that we are precisely, ultimately, limited creatures. And so I propose to you that these two opponent aspects of sacredness can be seen very readily within the light of the machinery of relevance realization, where the worldview attunement is a form of meta-meaning and therefore meta-assimilation, ultimately compression, integration, right? Things fitting together. We get an opposite, which is the meta-accommodation afforded by confronting the numinous in awe and potentially horror. And we talked about how horror is about exactly the demand, the confrontation with that which demands from us unanswerable, unachievable accommodation. So I propose to you that what sacredness is to play with, seriously play with the machinery of relevance realization as found within the primordial aspects of religio, and that doing this would be deeply advantageous to us because it is so foundational to our agency, to the world as an arena for our action, to our capacities for self-transcendence, and so forth. But caught up with that, when I invoked music as an example of this, right, was the idea that we often do this serious play by engaging in symbolic behavior. And so I'm putting the symbol here as something that has the capacity to, right, can function both ways. It can bring us into meta-accommodation, but of course it can also bring meta-assimilation. It can bridge between these two, and it can go in both directions. And so we are starting to unpack what the symbol is. And then I propose to you to, first of all, emphasize its distinction from a mere sign. A symbol doesn't just refer, a symbol exemplifies, it has a participatory aspect to it right from the beginning. And as I've already mentioned, that's going to be central to what we're talking about here, because these are at the level, right, of our, ultimately our participation in the agent arena, transjective evolution of our relevance realization processes. So, suggested to you that at the core of a metaphor, a symbol is a metaphor. Already we know that this has to be participatory. We'll come back to that. And I pointed out that the metaphors we're talking about here are profound in the sense that they are pervasive in our cognition, and they, right, are highly functional. I pointed here to the work of Lakoff and Johnson, and their idea about their work, right, in Metaphors We Live By, and a whole bunch of other books about how much our cognition is metaphorical. I then said there are some issues here, and this goes to some critiques made by Vervaeke and Kennedy and Vervaeke. Basically saying that they have this sort of purely bottom-up notion that the physical sensory motor domain is just projected up into the conceptual. And I suggested that it's more complex than that. And we took a look at that, and I suggested to you that instead of just the machinery of projection, which tends to be this one way, that we should think of the participatory relation as reflecting our capacity to play with exaptation. We can go sort of both ways with our exaptive machinery. Then I try to bring all these ideas together. The notion of participatory knowing, the notion of exaptation, with this idea that what a symbol is, it's a metaphor that allows me to hold something in mind that I normally can't hold in mind. So that I can activate the machinery that was at work in exaptation, and I can, in a sense, reverse, go back through it. I can have a symbol of a scale, and I could just stay there and think that. Or what I can do is I can actually try to participate, right, perspectively. I can engage with actually balancing. And then what I can do is reverse that process to some degree, by which, right, my capacity for balance has been exapted via, right, some exaptive processing on my cerebellum, so that I actually use it to find complex contingency relationships between any areas of my brain. So what's been happening, in fact, in neuroscience over the last 10 and 15 years is this revolution of our understanding of the cerebellum. We used to think the cerebellum was primarily about balance, and now we know that the cerebellum has all these terrific cognitive functions, because what it does is it basically, here's two areas of the brain that are often correlated together. The cerebellum picks up on trying to improve, smooth out, find the patterns of contingency and dependency between them. And so what I can do is I can activate, if you'll allow me this way of talking, my cerebellum and that machinery, which is precisely the machinery I need to practice the skill of being more just. I need the ability to coordinate, to find, to sense complex contingencies between multiple variables and make that better. The cerebellum is exactly the machinery I want to, right? I want to activate. I'm using activation sort of as like the reverse of exaptation. I want to activate it because that will actually allow me to participate in the processing that will allow me to cultivate the skills that will make me just, that will then ultimately ground my conception of justice. So this holding in mind, activating process, right, allows me to deeply participate in justice. Because I'm literally becoming more just. The symbol is affording me, by making use of the exaptation machinery, which is, see, that this is bidirectional in a way in which the projection isn't. Right? The symbol is doing that for me in a powerful way. And you're saying, wow, this is so, really? Come on. Okay, you are much more symbolic in a participatory fashion than you might think. Okay, look at these. Quickly, without thinking. Which one is Booba and which one is Kiki? Which one is Booba? Which one is Kiki? Overwhelmingly, and I mean, because this experiment has been done by Ramachandran and others, this is Booba, and this is Kiki. I do this all the time in my class. What's going on there? Why is this Booba? And this, you've never heard these words before. They don't mean anything for it to you. And people will say things like, well, this is sharp and spiky, and so is this. And I say to them, what do you mean? How is this sharp? I can't cut myself on it. And how is this sharp and spiky? And they're doing all this bridging and this cerebellar coordination between different sense modalities and different ways of acting, and you're doing it like that. There it is. Now, this is playful, all right? I'm just activating it to no purpose. But of course, I can activate this machinery to a purpose. That's what I'm doing when I'm holding up the scales. But you have to participate in it. You have to live with the symbol. You have to internalize it. It's almost like you have to savor it. one of the things we need to pay more attention to, I would argue, is the work of Jonathan Pageau. I mean, his work on the symbolic world is largely about trying to get us to remember the symbolic aspects of our existence. And I mean this in a deeply respectful way, and I hope Jonathan takes it that way, to get us to savor the symbolic and how deeply functional and active it is in us. All right. So symbols are participatory in this fashion that I've tried to explain to you. And then, because of that, symbols have a capacity to put us into this relationship with something. So here's justice. Here's the symbol. Here's me, right? And as I've tried to do, we've got the symbol, and what it's doing is it's actually transforming me in a powerful way. It is reactivating, reconfiguring my machinery so that I become capable of interacting with the world, so that I now start to be able to see through the symbol. Here's the original. Remember, like how you're looking through the pig at Sam. I'm looking through, which means beyond and by means of the symbol, right? I get to see more and realize and make more justice. So I'm activating the machinery of balance that's allowing me the perspectival awareness, the sensitizing me to the contingent relationships between variables. It's actually helping me to cultivate the skills of justice, right? And of course, as I start to get better contact with this is disclosing itself in a new way, and it discloses itself more through the processing I'm doing. And so what starts to happen, right, is this interesting thing that's going on. So let me try and give you another example of this. And let's use something at the other end, something that's not so conceptual, at least in one sense. So I'm meditating, and I'm following my breath in meditation, breathing in and out, following my breath. Some of you have seen perhaps the videos I've given on the instruction on how to practice Vipassana. Now what's happening is normally I'm focusing on my breath, right? And that act of focusing and following my breath is helping me to scale down. And we've talked about that, scale down my attention. And for a long time, it can stay that way. But what can happen is I can become sensitized by scaling down, because you increase your sensitivity, to how much in process my mind is. So I'm normally thinking of my mind as a thing. I might even think of that my mind is a container that contains things. Like, here's my mind, and in it is an experience of pain, for example. But when I practice watching my breath, I start to realize that's not actually how my mind is unfolding. My mind really isn't like a container in that sense. It's much more like my mind is a very fine-grained process, and even something like pain isn't a thing. There's paining, and it's multiple. When I'm watching my pain, for example, I've got a pain in my leg while I'm meditating. There's all these different layers. There's all these things unfolding and happening in a complex fashion. It really isn't a noun. It's much more like a verb, and it's really not something I possess. It's really much more something I participate in. And so, do you see what I'm saying? The breath starts to become a participatory symbol of the impermanence of things, how much they are interconnected and flowing. And that can then, of course, have an impact on my sense of myself, that maybe I'm much more impermanent and interconnected. And so the breath can become, in that sense, symbolic for me. I can start to see into impermanence, and then I can start to see into, I look through the breath into impermanence and interconnectedness, and I start to look back. And so, of course, what's happening, now you can also train this deliberately, is in addition to scaling down, I might suddenly find myself scaling up and seeing how all of reality, including myself, is impermanent and interconnected. So notice what the symbol is doing for you here, right? And here I want to go back to Michael Polanyi again. Let's take another symbol. Here's the patriot looking at the flag, right? It's Canadian flag, perhaps. Oh, Canadians have a weird attitude towards their patriotism. Let's make it an American flag because that's more prototypical. Right. Okay, there's the American flag. Okay. It has to do with America was born out of a revolution where we sort of were birthed from Great Britain in a much more familial relationship. There's nothing deep there. I'm just pointing out why I shifted my example. So Polanyi says, when you're looking at a flag, of course, you're always doing that thing he talked about. All their subsidiary awareness is being, right, integrated together into your focal awareness. Now, normally, when I'm doing all of this because what I'm interested in is what I'm focally aware of. I'm interested. So when I want to drink, I'm doing all of this subsidiary integration into my focal awareness of the bottle because what I'm actually interested in is the bottle. I need to get the bottle and to drink, right? But sometimes, and again, notice my language, we play with this. We look at the flag not because we're actually intrinsically interested in using the flag in some fashion. We're using the flag symbolically, right? I'm looking at the flag because by looking at the flag, I'm actually integrating different aspects of myself together. So although I'm doing this process, normally what I'm inherently interested in is the focal object. But sometimes when I'm acting symbolically, although I'm focusing my attention on this, like focusing my attention on the breath, what I'm actually interested in is playing with the process. So by contemplating the flag, right, the patriot is bringing up all kinds of emotions and associations and other things, and think about the cerebellar activity here, right, and integrating them together. By looking through all of these, and think about a metaphor, by looking through all of these things, like I'm looking through all of these different subsidiary things onto the flag, and by doing that, I'm actually integrating all of these aspects of myself together, and I'm becoming more patriotic. I'm actually participating in patriotism. Now that's powerful, right? Now, put that together with what I just did. I'm looking at my breath, and I'm doing all this, and the point about all of this is to, right, so let's change this. Now this is my breath, right? Right? I'm looking at my breath, but the point is to to integrate all of my processing together. But what can happen, right? And that's one way in which my breath is symbolic. So one way in which my breath is symbolic is it gives me a focal thing that I'm aware of. I can activate all of this stuff, and I can, integrate myself onto the thing. I'm becoming somebody else. But as I just said a few minutes ago, but the thing is, the breath can also suddenly disclose reality to me. The breath can also reveal an aspect of reality. Okay, let's try and put this together. Try to go very carefully here.
All right. Yeah.
Okay, break time.
I'm going to blow us up on the big screen.
Yes,
you want to blow us up? Does that mean to explode us or to inflate us like a balloon to fill up the space?
To explode the size of ourselves up into
there we go.
the grand rectangle.
So
metaphors, pervasive and highly functional.
so it's the symbol is the metaphor that's pervasive and highly functional.
Well, metaphors themselves is what
Yeah.
Lakoff and Johnson are telling us. So much of cognition is metaphorical. Metaphors are pervasive and highly functional. But instead of just something to project through, they also reflect our capacity to play with exaptation, and that's what we do with symbols. Symbols are metaphors to hold in mind something that we can't normally hold in mind, as we were discussing earlier. And to be able to reflect and participate and play with balancing and reversing that process so I can use it to find and understand and activate, relate with complex relationships in any part of my brain or with the outer world. So we know the cerebellum has this capacity to do more than balance. It finds things, it smooths them out, it defines patterns of contingency in relation for us. It helps us to practice the skills of interaction of multiple variables, basically. So we can activate to participate in something, but which is the opposite of exaptation, activation, and we can hold in mind while activating the process to afford ourselves to gain new affordances in the wider world. So then he gives us this example of the kiki and the buba.
Yeah, where kiki is this sharp shape, and buba is this smooth shape, and naturally we just like almost, it's not 100%, but it's like as close as you get statistically with something like this.
Super reliably.
Yeah.
Most people will say, because they'll give you the terms kiki and buba, and they'll show you the
and
symbols.
that's because the metaphor of, say, like sharp,
which goes with which.
K is a very sharp sound. A greater than or less than 90-degree angle is a sharp angle. The boo is very round and soft, and then you have the rounded soft shape.
Itself feels softer than k.
Yeah.
But the whole time here we're using metaphors: soft, hard,
and your brain's
sharp.
naturally doing this anyway while looking at a shape.
So quickly, automatically, we're such poetic creatures. We don't even realize that we are constantly speaking in poetics.
Well, why do we refer to cars as she? It used to be, well, nowadays cars are less curvy and cool, but cars were built this beautiful rounded shape. And interestingly enough, when you draw, male versus female, you can do it very simply with just a sharp line or a smooth line. And we can assign a gender to them with the way our brains work, because we think soft shapes, soft female, hard, rigid shapes, rigid mindsets, chiseled jaw lines, hopefully some chiseled abs, sharp, jabby, So
that's interesting.
Yeah, like our brain works on symbolic metaphor
all the time, and he turns us on then to Jonathan Pageau's channel, The Symbolic World. Jonathan Pageau's
get into
work
that.
is
It's actually
excellent.
Very cool stuff.
Super intriguing. He breaks down all kinds of different modern movies and older Disney movies and just all kinds of symbols that we've used throughout history, and he helps you understand why we have these symbols and how deeply interrelated we are with them.
Yeah,
our understanding of the world is with them.
He gets us to savor the symbolic world,
to recognize and savor the symbols, to realize how deep and constant that processing and that use of symbols is within us. Symbols transform our capacity to interact so that we can see through the symbol, just like we do with metaphors, to be able to see and understand more and activate more, and cultivate more deeply our contact with reality, to fine-tune our contact with reality.
And then, simultaneously, the idea, say, like justice, discloses more about yourself as well and transforms yourself.
Yes,
so it's a participatory, transformative relationship.
Yeah. And then to be in accord with that balance, then you realize how one has to themselves change. So it does become a reciprocal relation. Vervaeke speaks of Vipassana breath or meditation. Vipassana meditation. In this meditation, you're focusing on your breath, and in doing so, you're scaling down your attention to the inner and becoming sensitized. And this is not desensitized, but more sensitive to, sensitized to how the mind processes.
Yeah.
And this is really cool. It's an awesome aspect of meditation, and there's no end to how informative it can be for one. it's really cool. I highly encourage everybody to get into a meditative practice. Look up Vervaeke's meditative practice. He's got some really useful tutorials on his channel. Breath becomes a symbol or symbolic of how impermanent we are, how also interconnected we are. Like as I breathe in, I'm breathing in what trees breathe out, and as I breathe out, trees are breathing in what we exhale.
And the breath doesn't last long, and neither does anything in the world.
How flowing that interconnection is. That's right. Yeah. So the impermanence, the interconnection, and the flowing sense of things become super apparent just by doing this breath-focused meditation. Yeah. And we can look through the breath into that impermanence, and then we can also scale up. So now we're not just scaling down inside. We can also scale up and recognize how much of reality itself is impermanent and interconnected and flowing.
It's interesting on the scaling down end of the breath. Your concept of mind becomes a verb opposed to a noun. So instead of being a container that holds things, it's a process. So your mind is not like a thing you possess, but a verb that you do. So you do mind.
Or you be as mind.
Do you mind?
Yeah. Do you mind? Yeah. Oh, that's so good. Are you even minding what you're doing? Yeah. Do you mind?
Yeah, weird. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. It is a verb. Yeah.
We can make.
Minding. Are you minding yourself?
We can make a meme, like that. Do you even lift, bro? Meme. It's like, do you even mind, man?
Do you even mind, man? Are you even aware of your minding?
Well, that's the thing. The verbing. I love verbing words. So this one just tickled me pink. Instead of verbing a word, now you're verbing what you would think of as a noun type thing. It's a thing that you can have, your mind. But it's not a noun. It's not like a cat or a chair.
To be mindful is to be ever more aware of the process of minding in your own brain, because you can just simply be the awareness of the minding that's going on in your brain. And so you're in a still presence from that space, very grounded, still place, while you're watching this active mind. And this is how, when you take that step back into presence, how relaxing that can be, how that can help us deal with the stresses of life so much more. Yep. And so there it is. So breath becomes symbolic of that impermanence, interconnection, and flowingness. And we can look also outward. You could say we could scale up our attention now and see how that happens in reality itself.
Yeah, and that's where I think, I guess the Hermeticists kind of realized through their practices something like this, and why I think the first Hermetic principle is the mentalism, the world or the universe is of the mind, not my mind or your mind, but it is of the ultimate mind.
Projection of an ultimate
and if mind is a verb in a process, that makes a lot of sense.
Yes,
it's the process of
it does make a lot of sense. Yeah, right. And then you get into this,
not a Hermeticist,
that's why we
by
call
the way,
it creation.
Just,
it's this constant creating principle. And what I was just thinking about there is, so as we're practicing meditation, like Vipassana style, and we're keeping our attention on, say, the breath, there's an infinite amount of definition. You could say increased resolution, constantly increasing pixel count, understanding of life and reality, yourself and the outer world that you gain through meditation. There's infinite definition and little texture and detail that you will continually be picking up in self-understanding and relation with the outer environment.
If another one of the Hermetic principles, which is the as above, so below, like the largest things are structured very much like the smallest things, and everything in between. That makes sense. Like how, because there's stories of people that, shouldn't know the information that they know, like because maybe they're super isolated and they don't get news from people or anything, but somehow they know what's going on. Yeah. And not just singular individuals, but there's also groups of people that these stories have been told by. Somehow they can watch the world happen. And, it's not like, doing this gives you some like clairvoyance or anything, but I guess if you truly, really understood how your mind worked and participated in that,
it can become hard to tell apart from clairvoyance, though, because you get so good at it.
Yeah, because then you can just like, well, given the way things are and how the weather's been and how I know how humans are and how I know how myself is, this must be happening. This must be happening.
See body language and some of these people.
Yeah, and somebody just one person every 2 years comes up to the hill. You see something different, and then you put yourself in that mind space and figure it out. So
it helps us grow wiser. Yeah, is what it really does. It's enwisening.
But interesting. So he uses this American flag symbol. So using this flag as, when looking at the flag, all subsidiary awarenesses. So all your outside awarenesses, your awareness of the shape of it, the color of it,
what it
represents, the representorial significance of it, what nowadays people think of it, all these things together, and brings it all together into a single focal awareness that you can look at.
Yeah. Because that's what the focal awareness is for. It's like where we focus, what we're interested in. So it's bringing the subsidiary awarenesses into our primary focal awareness,
and then integrating all these different, all the different portions of your self's processing.
Isn't that cool?
As well.
Yeah. So we
so it makes
sometimes
you
we play
more
with this.
patriotic, if you will.
Yes.
And
that's to understand, the importance of freedom and liberty and all these, different principles that we espouse. That the flag stands for. So it helps us contemplate our own interaction with that.
Maybe that's the reason. Like, not just identifying different clans or warring parties or whatever. Why humans have used flags, because we use flags for a lot of things, marking a path, sending out prayers, surrendering, declaring war,
marking
territories, giving information, like the flag alphabet that we use on ships.
Or surrender, white flag.
Yeah, and surrender, that's a good one. So it's like when somebody puts up this surrender, the intention is clear, and then the person, by looking at that flag, becomes more peaceful, if you will. So it's almost like this little magical device that we use to convey a lot, and not just convey and project a lot, but also then induce a process within the other individual
inviting
as
a
well.
certain kind of participation from the other person that sees that flag.
It's interesting. I've always wondered about that. I think Eddie Izzard had this joke, but about flags, and like coming and conquering. It's like, this is our land. Why is this your land? Oh, we have a flag. Do you have a flag? And I always thought it was like, oh yeah, it's just a way to, ownership and whatever. This is ours and this is yours. But there is a portion of that, yes, of course. But also, like with this example of the American flag, I'm an American, and the American flag is, more than just, what is it, freedom, justice, and the pursuit of happiness, and all that. It's also, if you come here and you want to be an American, you're an American. In America, we do things, and everybody thinks it's a little backwards, but hey, it works for us, for the most part. It's also, the history of it, and I live on the East Coast, right in the middle of it, so a lot of history happened around here. I used to live on the manor property of Charles Washington's family home, who was George Washington's great grandnephew or something like that. So it's like, it's always there. So there's, for me personally, even a deeper meaning in looking at the American flag and the different iterations that got there as well.
Yes, and this is all the subsidiary awareness right now that DJ's
all
talking
in one,
about. So he knows all of that. Whenever you see a flag, you can take it all the way back to the origin of that flag. We separated ourselves from Britain, and we had a revolution.
And even the American flag, the stripes are the 13 original colonies, and then the stars are the 50 states. So that's telling you about the makeup and history of the American flag without any of the patriotic stuff, or of American itself. Yes. So, we're talking about the American flag, but we use symbols in a lot of different ways for this. Like,
so that aspect of the flag is communicating something to the outer world, and for us, we're recognizing principles of freedom and liberty and justice and fairness and equality and these kinds of things because we participate in it. We are Americans, so we participate with this.
Well, and if you look at like
way.
coat of arms and stuff like that too, it's the same thing. You have a family coat of arms that is different information displayed on there. If they're two fighting lions, okay, there's some regal aspect to it, but you better not mess with them because they are kind of proud of their might and being able to be ferocious when they need to. Or somebody who has a mythical beast like a unicorn or a dragon,
so they're like
or something,
depicting their values.
Yes,
and things like that.
And able to, it's just kind of like our handshaking with strangers rituals too. It's a psychotechnology to deal with a distributed cognitive network of strangers or people who are not necessarily in your direct kin group.
New encounters with total strangers, like this kind of thing or this kind of thing.
But if you have a flag that has a monster on it,
shaking hands,
like, are you going to mess with those people that have the monster on their thing, or you're going to question it, or
You're probably not going to wave at those guys.
or
you might actually
you
duck
wave, or you do it
behind
a little
cover.
bit more respectfully. You're like, okay,
Yeah. If they saw you, then
yeah,
like,
but just
bow. You bow.
yeah.
Or you hold up your weapon if you realize they're dangerous and you got weapons too, and you know that something might happen. Well, hey, we're willing to fight too, so
Yeah. And well, so it's integrating a lot of different ideas and processes into one focal point that you can hold without words,
yeah,
ultimately.
yeah. Because at first we only had like ooga booga, it's not really saying much. You come up with a flag, a symbol, you can say a lot more.
Yeah, well,
I think we probably use symbols, and we were painting ourselves before we deeply developed language, most likely.
well, and we were,
right?
warding our land with, say like
Runes, like
runes,
sigils.
or formations of bones,
Yes,
or
yes.
standing
There you go.
rocks,
Yep.
or something. As humans, we like to communicate. We
Isn't it
want
nice
to
we've gotten to the
communicate.
point where we beautify our land and
Yeah, right.
We
Well,
landscape now.
Except for a lot of modern architecture, which is absolutely garbage, but
About
that's
as
another
bland as
story.
you can get, right? It's not even inspiring and evoking something transcendent anymore like we used to.
Yeah,
with
let's
a lot of
take
our great buildings.
let's take brutalism and make it out of plastic and glass. Yeah, sorry.
corporatism at its core.
And also just, people's preferences do change as far as in architects are no different. And architecture is like the blending between engineering and art. And engineers, well, they want stuff to work. And artists want stuff that says something or stands out and makes a point. And, nothing stands out more than
Inspires,
just a
uplifts,
big rectangle
gives
in the
joy.
middle of short rectangles.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? It literally stands out or up, but either way.
how we come up with these things.
So that's the ends of my notes for that bit. Do you have anything else?
Let me see here. I did have something else, just a little wee bit, though we might have covered it.
Wee bit?
So we went back to breath one more time and how it. So we're seeing again. Okay, breath is integrating our processing together, helps us disclose reality together in both directions, the inner and the outer relations with reality. It can reveal an aspect of reality we didn't see before, and I think I covered that when I was talking about how it increases our sense of definition of everything around us and ourselves, our understandings of ourselves. So meditate, boys and girls. Do some mindfulness practice every day. There's an inward mindfulness practice. You can do a contemplative outward practice where you're reading a book and taking notes or journaling at the end of the day, or just pondering on life while you sit and sip your tea in the evening. And then you can also have a movement meditative practice. And if you bring all three of these together, some Tai Chi or martial art practice or some kind of free running or something else or dance, then you're really supercharging that mindfulness practice. And now I think we can dip back into these deep waters. So let's do this thing, guys. This is getting back into it. Episode 35 of John Vervaeke's Awakening series. Make sure if you guys are enjoying this to give Vervaeke likes and subscribes. Check out the rest of his channel. There's so much going on that comes after the Awakening series. If you're enjoying all of this and you're like, okay, this is awesome, I'm learning a lot, but what do I do with all of this? There's still a meaning crisis. Start watching his series After Socrates and check out what's going on over there. And if you enjoy what we're doing also, your support helps us reach more people and get these ideas out there, guys. So please do smash that like, hit the subscribe, keep up with what we're doing, and check out our band, American Dharma, as well. We got shows coming up.
And I noticed too, we got a few new subscribers.
Yeah,
So if
welcome,
you've
guys. Thank
newly
you.
subscribed, very much appreciate it. We were sitting at 119 for a while, so it's good to see those numbers change around.
Yeah,
Know that more people.
We need people to help us with marketing. So if you guys know people that you think would enjoy it, share it with your friends and family.
Yeah. Can you be free marketers first and just share
Any
the
volunteers
lectures
out there that would like to help us, we're definitely open
or
to it.
even actually you can do this kind of thing on your own time, like
Even
as far as
better.
get your friends together and watch a lecture series and take notes together. Like if it's something that, like, if you have friends that are nerds just like you, and it's a great substitute for drinking and not as complicated as Dungeons and Dragons.
Right? Yeah, this is a great series. It's on Spotify. Actuali podcast is on Spotify as well. If you guys are looking for some guided meditations or guided Wim Hof breathing sessions,
there's a lot of that stuff.
There's a lot of stuff in the previous episodes of this podcast as well that are available for you to listen anywhere that you like to listen, everywhere podcasts are found, and also here now on YouTube. And I'm very excited to be doing this video aspect now. We're playing in the YouTube realm now where we haven't really played much before. I invited DJ on to this journey with me, and man, you've made it through 35 episodes of a 50 lecture series so far with me, so kudos, brother. Thank you, man.
Well, it took you a year of pestering me before I'd do it, so.
And I'm glad I did, though, and I'm glad that you caved in eventually, and now you're enjoying it.
Yeah,
like,
oh yeah.
Hell yeah, man.
No, I like to
It's
learn.
helped me understand so much better than I would, even if I was rewatching this whole series by myself. I would not have the level of understanding I've had by being able to bounce back and forth with somebody else
Well,
who's picking up where I leave off, man. Like, there's
distributed
stuff you're
cognitive
picking up
networks.
that I miss. It's awesome. Yeah, distributed cognition works, man. It
Yeah,
does.
no,
It does.
it was a great psychotechnology that was developed very early on in our
Civilization making.
Yeah,
like
in our
a couple
civil-
thousand years ago, we were doing this in Greece, but we've lost track of it.
And then, I think we've probably been doing this for, in different ways for closer
Eons.
to,
Hundreds of thousands,
since we were Homo sapien sapien,
Yep.
I think we were starting to try to figure this out.
We were even doing it before that when we
Yeah.
were just hominids, because you see chimps doing this when they hunt in the woods. They're using distributed cognition.
Yeah. Well, even,
Now, not with language, not nearly as sophisticatedly as we can, but
even the
were doing it.
Neanderthals and the Denisovans were finding stuff that leads us to believe that they had the, we'll say, makings of a pre-civilization capacity. And I say pre-civilization capacity because not saying that they were on the edge of creating civilization, but they were creating the capacity for much larger groupings of individuals. And this is,
They had systems of worship. They were making
how
music.
how
they were
far
growing
do
food.
Neanderthal and Denisovan predate us?
Right.
Like we were there at the same time, but there's some predating to us. So
Yeah,
it's like
yeah.
this process very well may have been started before Homo sapiens were really anything to be looked at,
Right.
which is fascinating.
Yeah.
That like there's some things that we do and we use that like culturally might be older than Homo sapiens sapien themselves, like directly.
And the brain's been growing this capacity ever since.
Why do we smile at each other?
Yeah, yeah.
Where did that come from? Because like in
It's a
apes,
constant
if you
call and
smile,
response that we're doing.
that's angry. That's don't
Yeah.
mess with me.
Yeah.
But something.
But that's such a deep level of our communication, the way that we're constantly making these little minor muscular movements in our faces, even to say that.
Why did this become a hail?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's probably older than humans because humans probably.
Because it's like help at some point too, right?
Notice me
when you're reaching
You know,
out.
Notice,
Notice me.
Also, my hands are open.
See me. I'm here. I'm
I
open,
want
not
to be
grasping
seen
anything.
by you. Yeah. And well, I could imagine early, Homo sapiens interacting with Neanderthals for the first time, and the only thing that they understood was Neanderthals going like this, and that's like, oh, that's also something we do.
Yeah.
And then maybe some other gestures started coming that are now commonplace.
Yep.
And we don't even think about that could be, hundreds
so
of thousands
old.
of years old.
Yeah. but this kind of thing and smiling, they're ancient. They're so ancient that people that are thousands of miles apart, oceans apart even, still share these traits and characteristics.
Yeah.
All right, guys, let's do it. We're jumping back.
At one stage, I'm doing this, and what I'm interested in is this. This is my inherent interest. Although my focal awareness is here, I'm focusing precisely because I'm trying to, via a metaphorical process, by looking through all of these subsidiary elements, I'm actually integrating them together. I'm not actually trying to get an insight like I normally do in metaphor. But what can happen is, I can actually get an insight. This can suddenly reveal aspects of the world to me, the impermanence and interconnectedness. And now I'm actually interested in my breath, because my breath is a symbol in another sense. My breath is a symbol in that it allows me to see into the impermanence and interconnectedness of reality. Notice what can happen is I can resonate between these. Okay, let's do it. I'm looking at my breath. I become more integrated. And precisely because I'm much more integrated, my processing becomes more powerful. And then suddenly what happens is I see something in my breath. I get a realization. The world is disclosed to me. And that opens me up in powerful ways. And then now when I refocus on the breath again, now I'm reintegrating all of that. But then what can happen, of course, is, right, now as I reintegrate and recoordinate, again, I can more deeply see into what the reality of my breath is disclosing to me. And I move more deeply. Do you see what I'm saying? You get this symbolic resonance that's going on. As I see more deeply into the object, it draws me in, and then that affords much more powerful integration. But the much more powerful integration actually coordinates my cognition much more, so I can see more deeply into the reality if I'm relating to it symbolically. Symbols are, in this sense, capable of affording anagoge. They are capable of giving you this capacity whereby I get inner optimization, and then I see more deeply into the thing. And then by seeing more deeply into the thing, I get more inner optimization, and the whole process flows anagogically. So I'm looking at the balance. And then I activate all of this machinery, and then I look through it at the symbol, and I'm looking through it at justice and coordinating all the things, right? But then I start to see aspects in the balance that I hadn't seen before, precisely because of how sensitized I am to the symbol. I start to see how, right, it's actually never completely stable. If you look at the pictures, the scales, they're often always off. Balance is something, right, very much a process, not a thing. And then that causes me to activate different aspects of myself. This is like, if you remember, when the mother-in-law has the bidirectional insight, the sensibility transcendence. Not only seeing her daughter-in-law differently, but seeing her own seeing differently. That transframing. So, symbols have the capacity to do this. Let's return back to something that I think is purely symbolic in the sense that I mean, which is music. Right? So you're listening to the music, right? But it's not like when you're listening to a sound and you're trying to make out what's causing that sound. Is it a tiger? Is it a noise in the bush? You're listening to the music, and although you're focusing on it, right? You're not trying to get behind it. You're focusing on it because the way in which you're being integrated together by onto the music is crucial. But then, what happens, of course, is that aspects of the music are disclosed to you, and you realize things, you see things that you haven't seen before, and that changes and alters how you can then understand and listen to the music. And so you get drawn in a very powerful way. Now, let's put this together with all of this machinery together with another aspect of the symbol that I've already hinted at, right? Which is, of course, the way in which symbols are putting you into confrontation with what is potentially mysterious. So here's your frame, right? And here is a frame you aspire to, a more comprehensive one. Now you need something that can reach you inside this frame, but it can't be totally captured by this frame, because if it's captured by this frame, you'll stay in this frame. It has to insinuate itself into this, but change stuff such that you are it actually drives you to expanding your frame. So it has to both activate you but draw you beyond yourself to a state of like I'm trying not to use some technical terms here. What a symbol has to do, right, is it has to reach into your worldview. But remember what the Gnostics were talking about here. Remember how you're existentially entrapped. You want to be in another worldview. You want to find that worldview viable. You need something that can come into this worldview, but won't be stable within it. It has to be It has to be transgressive. It has to shake things up and then, right, put you into all of this machinery that we've been talking about, but in a way that is making you move to and become capable of dwelling within that more expansive worldview. In this sense, symbols are deeply ecstatic. We get our word ecstasy from this, but what this literally means is a symbol helps you to stand beyond yourself. So let's go back to the example, right? I'm trying to use as many examples as possible. I've got the scales. I'm activating balance. That allows me to start doing the skills. That gets me some sense of justice. I start to be able to see justice and realize justice in the world that I couldn't before because of my sensibility change, my skill acquisition, my sensibility transcendence. And that starts to make me more just. And then what's happening is my world is being opened up, and in a coordinated fashion, I'm being transformed to fit that expanding world. And this is, of course, why symbols often are associated with wonder and awe, etc. So symbols are ecstatic in that fashion. As I've tried to show you throughout this, they're participatory. And I've tried to show you how they're integrative, not just in a simple part whole, but in the anagogic sense, sensibility transcendence. They're integrating you together, right? Language slows you down so much. They're integrating you together, they're integrating a new world together, and they're integrating that new world together as they're integrating you together in an integrative fashion. So when a Christian sees the cross, of course, first of all, the cross is, right, it's tapping into that exaptive machinery. It's taking all this perceptual machinery and it's playing with it, the vertical and the horizontal. That's being exapted. And all of that machinery that we normally look through is being exapted and it's being used, and then we're looking into there. And if we're receptive, and of course, the question is why some people are, why some people aren't, right? But if we're receptive, then that interaction starts to affect us. We start to become a different kind of person as we're integrated in our attention on the cross. But that, of course, starts to also disclose to us aspects of reality that we normally might not be able to hold in mind, like suffering, like the relationship between eternity and time. And those go from being ideas to things that we are confronting, engaging with. And they can draw us in, which then, of course, integrates me more powerfully while disclosing a world. And if I'm willing to play the serious play with the symbol, I will start to be transformed in a coupled fashion to my world such that perhaps Christianity becomes viable for me, for example. This is how symbols work. So they're integrative in the anagogic sense. This is, of course, if you remember, why people do things like Jeep form. Finally, symbols are complex. And we have to remember, I'm using the scales to stand for justice, but justice isn't a single thing. And even when I talk about the breath and it's showing me impermanence and interconnectedness, those aren't single static things. They're complex unfolding realities. So symbols often are multifaceted. You'll get Athena, she's the symbol of wisdom, but she's also the symbol of weaving. She's the symbol of warfare. All these different areas are actually being drawn together because the symbol is also the potential for radically reconfiguring the shape of your salience landscape, connecting things that you normally do not connect together, such that you might have an insight into reality. Notice how the symbol is trying to do all of this. Because it's trying to set you in motion. It's trying to get you to do this. And in that sense, if you'll forgive the little bit of playfulness, it's epic. It's trying to draw you into something epic. It's trying to afford a way in which you can radically open up your world in meta-accommodation, triggering it, participating in it, confronting it, but also trigger your best machinery for being able to draw it into, relate it to, right? Who and what you are, so that you can become capable of dwelling within that expanded world. So meta-accommodation and meta-assimilation are both at work within the symbol. So, symbols are inherently transjective because they are between two worlds. The world you're in, the framing you're in, and the world you're trying to move to, the world you aspire to. They are transgressive in all the ways I've tried to suggest to you. They try to trigger transframing. They're transformative. Now, how does all of that machinery relate to sacredness? Well, I've already shown you how it can be bound up with awe and horror and wonder, but let's make this a little bit more precise. I'm going to propose something to you. I'm going to propose that we can use this term, as I have been throughout this series, differently. We don't mean, I'm going to use mythos rather than myth to keep that distinction. By mythos, I mean something that's always deeply connected to ritual, where ritual, and I've already argued this, doesn't mean some neurotic routine that I engage in. Ritual means inactive analogy, inactive anagoge. It means the processes by which I try to activate the machinery of transformation. Okay, so when I'm saying mythos, don't just hear patterns of representation, hear patterns of interaction. These are deeply enmeshed together. And then what we have, of course, are symbols in the way that I'm describing, right? And these symbols, right, are always going to be enmeshed with story, because you have to bring in the perspectival participatory knowing, and we've talked a bunch about how important narrative is for participatory and perspectival knowing. And of course, the story connects to the ritual, because if it's storied, you can enact it. Okay, so this is what I mean by mythos. This is what I mean by mythos. When we have a mythos that is about religio, such that we can activate religio and seriously play with it in order to enhance its capacities for meta-assimilation met accommodation, that's sacredness. That's sacredness.
Wow. Go ahead, Vervaeke. That was one of the best breakdowns I've heard in a minute from this guy. Where did we leave? Oh, let me see. Here we are. Inherent interest, right?
The inherent interest, focal area, and
so inherent interest in that focal awareness. Breath is a symbol that allows us to see in reality.
And it allows us to see the resonance between the inherent interest and the reveal, if you will. So your inherent interests move into your focal point, and that focal point then reveals things about yourself, about the world, about other things.
Okay, so there's subsidiary awarenesses. There's like these inherent interests.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like growing up in a historic place, like I was explaining earlier, focusing down on the flag, but then revealing more about myself and more about, say, if it's the flag, the country, and
my relation with it. And,
yeah.
Okay. So breath we see as a symbol that allows us to see into reality, and we're seeing how we can resonate between these two different modes of understanding through something like breath or any kind of symbol. When we're aware of the breath, we're more integrated, and we can realize and understand more and become more powerful. In those realizations can become more powerful and more resonant, and allow us to integrate further. So there's this recursive feedback loop that's occurring. The more deeply that we see in affords more integration within ourselves, and then it helps us see more into reality. And then as we see more into reality, that in turn tells us more about ourselves again, and it just keeps on building and building, right? So symbols can afford anagoge, transformation, transformative experience.
Yeah.
And so there's this. So like we're using all these metaphors to understand here, and balance is one of them. It's a process. It's not a thing. It helps to integrate different parts of ourselves. We know the cerebellum is doing this. And he brings up now the story of the mother that he presented earlier in the series, and her transframing. When she sees the daughter differently, she then in turn sees herself differently. And then that helps her understand her daughter better, and then further and further.
Seeing new things afforded by the resonance of the symbol, enhancing one's own seeing. Transframing. And music. So we're not, unless you're me and you're a weirdo, you're not listening to music to identify the sounds, which I do all the time because I'm just a weirdo. That's why I don't listen to much music.
One of your inherent interests.
Yeah. I'm like, what instrument is that and what is it doing? So that would be, we don't listen to music to get behind it. We listen to music to disclose understanding, to draw us in, to participate in. And this is one thing actually, like, I remember a lot as a kid listening to classical music. It was like going to a movie. It would draw you in. You'd close your eyes and you could feel the emotions. You could feel the tension building and building, breaking into calamity, and then the peace afterwards.
And when you say get behind it, you mean like we're not trying to control it. Or we're just trying to figure out what does it disclose to us? What does it help us realize?
Not just control, but like to get behind it is like not like we're not listening to music to be like, oh yeah, he had an awesome compressor on his voice there, and or like, is that a snake or something else I should worry about? Like not behind what makes. We're not trying to get behind what is making the sound, making the music. We're trying to get into it,
yes.
Opposed to see. It's like when you're watching a movie. Yeah, it's cool to see the making of, but you're not going to see the making of Lord of the Rings before you see the Lord of the Rings movie. Yeah, you know what I mean. We're doing this with music so we can be drawn into an experience, a moment. A lot of songs.
Yeah, and you watch the making of afterwards because you want to get more into that story that you just enjoyed so much.
Precisely, and maybe the story of the people who made that story happen. Yes. So it's another story that you're getting into. Yeah, but you're not going to watch a making of the making of.
So it's drawing you in, just like music draws you in. Yes. So it helps us realize, understand more about it, because each passage, each part of a changing song, it's telling us more and more about the song, and then
there's changes and then repetitions, and then you can expect to go like say like a verse chorus, and then I expect to go back to the verse, so I'm learning the structure of it. And then when they break the structure and say throw a bridge in there or something,
Surprises
like it
us.
breaks your framing a little bit, and you're like, ooh, wow. And now you have expectations of not really knowing, and then how they resolve it, and then you're like, and now
So it's
you
doing
see
all
how
these
it all comes together in the
revolutions
end.
where it resolves itself, and it's like note by note almost, like
Sure.
3 notes in a row. All of a sudden, that was a cool interplay. I like that. That brings me into it. It goes further on. The verse turns into a chorus. Oh, that's bringing me into it more. Then it surprises you after it's gone through a series, a cycle, and it does something unexpected, draws you in even more, and that's why we're drawn to music, because it's this interactive, reciprocal dance that we get involved in. It helps us to frame reality, an aspect of reality. Then it draws us beyond ourselves.
Yes.
And it brings us into a larger worldview. This framing process that we're always doing with all things is allowing us to do that. So we have a frame. Then we have a more complicated frame that we develop as we inquire into our initial framing. And then we have an even more comprehensive frame that then can develop. But sometimes we're challenging our own frames with new frames that we wouldn't want to adopt, but we're looking at them because we're trying to understand our own frame better. Now we've got a more holistic frame as a result.
Yeah, and actually I can break it down like as in like song format, how this works directly. So you have your, for lack of a better term, we'll call it your hook. Like is your intro, it's your thing that sets it up. You have chords that set what key you're in, so that's your expectations. And now there's this verse, which is starting this listening participation. You're like the verse is like somebody telling the story, and then when the chorus comes around, that now becomes a group participation. Everybody sings the chorus, and then maybe it goes back into the hook that got you again, or they go back into another part of the story.
Yeah.
And then that part of the story, the verse, furthers it to get into another chorus where you can participate. Maybe you extend this chorus this time, so you get extra participation that feels like it's really building towards something, and we're not sure where it's building to. And then, bam, it builds and it breaks your original framing, and it goes into something else. And then in that, like, let's call it a bridge, in that bridge, which bridges you from the main bulk towards the ending bulk, you're building a realm of maybe not expectation, but you're aware now of the structure and patterning of the song down to, the key it's in and everything, the story that it's telling, what your parts are to sing along in the choruses, and then where's it going to go back to? And then it goes back to something, maybe the chorus, and we're all back in it together. Or maybe it's, they're going to finish out this story. And then the ending of this song gives you a worldview of the entire song and leaves you with a sense of profound sati, if you will, like being part of it.
Culminates.
And particularly when you're listening with other people as well, like say in a concert atmosphere.
You're feeling it together.
Yeah. So like literally that's the process. And so when you're writing, if anybody out there is a musician and having trouble writing songs more than just your 3-chord verse chorus bridge verse chorus, which are fine. A lot of great songs are that, but think of the songs along those lines. First, you're setting up your parameters in the beginning, and then you're telling a bit of the story, and then you're welcoming others to come into something. And the chorus is usually the same words and structure every time, but sometimes your choruses will change ever so slightly depending on what the story is leading you to. And choruses go back to like old, like I believe like Greek. And they would have, like the story being told, and then the chorus would all say something together, and then the story would be told, and then the chorus would sit there and say something together. Yeah. So it's a group singular interaction naturally in music, the way we write music. At least what I'll say Western music, but even Eastern music to a certain familiarity still does the same thing. It has different traditions and cadences. But once you get used to listening to a lot of different kinds of music, you can pick them out like that and just be like, oh, or something where you're like, I don't know what that is. What is that?
Yeah,
I've got to figure that out. Which can draw then you got fanatics of musicians and stuff like that, which is
you get addicted to being drawn in and understanding and appreciating those little hooks
Well, because it literally makes you feel like you have a more profound connection and understanding of the world and yourself.
And you're relating with those artists, or you're relating with the others that appreciate those artists in a really...
Well, why do depressed teenagers listen to depressed teenager music?
Belonging.
Yeah, and also
comprehension.
By going through these emotions, it gives them a better understanding of the world.
Yes.
Now, mind you, if it keeps making you depressed and you keep doing it, that's a parasitic
at least relates
process,
and empathizes with you too.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So it does a lot of things.
And you can go much further with it. You really can let it help grow you too.
Yes, and symbols as confrontational forces, opposed to just ideas.
Yes.
The
symbols are ecstatic. They help us stand beyond ourselves.
So before we go to that, so you have your original box that you're in, and that is your starting framing.
Yes.
And what you need for a good confrontational symbol is something that sets you up in the starting frame, but doesn't limit you to it, but also drives you into what would be your optimal frame.
It challenges your initial frame. Without totally disrupting it enough,
because you need that initial frame to then build the optimal frame around or aside from the original frame, depending on where you're at.
There might be aspects of the original frame that are useful, so you don't destroy it entirely.
The
you
symbol also,
and then you come up with a new frame.
It also must be unstable.
Yeah.
That
means it's constantly modifiable.
Yeah. Yes.
Precisely.
And doesn't.
That's the way we want to be, right?
Sure. Yeah. Well, you don't. Like marble's really cool, but you don't want to be a piece of marble because pieces of marbles are just really good at just staying in one spot.
We don't want to be so stuck in a worldview that we can't upgrade it when new information comes in.
Even though the marble can be beautiful, it only stays in that one spot unless you move it or carve it.
But when we get attached to our ideas, we can become possessed by them, possessed by our ideologies, our worldviews, such that we're so identified to them, we're afraid of them being disrupted. And we even identify them to such a degree that when someone challenges or says something that's contrary to our worldview, we take it as a personal attack.
Yeah.
That's the ego.
Yeah.
And there's no need to do that. You are not your ideas. You have ideas. Yeah. Who is the you that has them? It is unassailable. It's infinite. It's just pure awareness.
Your mind isn't a thing to be had, but a verb to do.
Yes.
Yes. So as far as the ecstatic, so this instability puts you into the machinery that we've been talking about. Seeing through and all that jazz, and putting you beyond yourself. So that's beyond yourself is the ecstatic. And that actually explains the word ecstasy. So like we describe like the orgasm as ecstasy, and we also describe the orgasm as kind of being an out of body beyond one's self experience. So ecstasy is ecstatic, outside, like extra means outside of. So if you get wine that's extra sweet, it's not sweet. Just saying, it's confusing because we tend to think of extra as more, which also makes sense because it's extra. It's more from outside being put in, but it's. It
can also be the world opening us to us, like we are opening up and expanding to fit and reframe. So symbols allow for sensibility transcendence, meaning simply that symbols can actually allow us to transcend our particular sensibilities, our preferences, and preferred ways of seeing the world. Symbols are integrative. In the anagogic sense, integrating us, then integrating us with the world, so integrating us within ourselves, then we're integrating more with the world, and then the world and ourselves are integrating together in an integrative fashion. That was a really cool part that I'm going to try and make a little short out of when he said that. That was great.
Yeah, and this, so before that, the participatory, so we can get so exactive, participatory, and integrative, and this participatory integrativeness allows us to hold on to ideas more than just ideas, but as confronting forces, like the cross.
That's right.
Isn't just an idea, but it's confronting you. It's confronting you with your own suffering, failings, but also your understanding and your potential. And instead of these just being ideas, they're things that are confronting you. Your own potential is confronting you in a sense. Your own weakness confronts you in a sense. Which that is much deeper than just say it. Well, it's a verb now. It's a confrontation, not just something to be had.
That's it. Yeah.
Idea to be had. Now it's an interactive, just like your mind is not just something to be had.
It's not something you just believe in. It's something that you orient by.
Yes, and you do.
And you do. That's right. And so if we're receptive, that interaction of looking in starts to connect us, change us as a person, while also affording us new understandings of reality, so that we can confront them and integrate them, just as you said. Yes.
And symbols are complex.
Yes, you can get involved in a serious play with them.
Like he said, justice is not a simple thing, because justice is particularly the symbol of justice is many components. It's not just the scale and the woman, but then also if you use different symbologies for it, and like the cross is not a simple symbol. There's a lot. You could say it is the cross is the point in the middle of the cross is the point that you're at between suffering and understanding, or you could say it's the thing that killed thousands of people in a horrible way, which it was. So that's the suffering component, but also
it's man's misuse of what
you can take the symbol of the cross and put it on the crossroads and meet the devil at it.
That killed millions or hundreds of thousands, whatever it was, during the Holy Wars, in the name of Christianity, were actually operating outside of what Christ's way was actually supposed to be teaching us.
There are dangers in symbols too, since
I wouldn't call those real Christians. They were failing at Christianity when you do that, right?
Yeah, but the complexity of a symbol, which it has to be a good symbol, is also a dangerous thing, because then people can play with the meanings, and particularly with the postmodernist idea of there's infinite valid meanings that are all equally as valid. It's like no.
So you can co-opt a symbol and you can add your own interpretation.
I don't think Christianity is a death cult because we worship some guy that was stapled to a piece of wood. I'm not going down that route. That symbol means a lot more, and the symbol of it, that story, means way more than just
certainly
a guy being nailed to a piece of wood.
Oh yeah, and then when people when they stop believing in God because of that view of Christianity as this judgeful old patriarch in the sky, is a very fairy tale conception of what Christ was trying to teach people in this world. And of course there's a natural chagrin towards the mistakes people made in Christ's name, the things that they did that were quite unchristian throughout history. That just shows how fallible we as humans are, because it doesn't matter what religion or what kind of governing system human beings are operating by, their inner capacity for evil will still find its way out oftentimes, and it will co-opt symbols and stories and culture for its own ends. Looking
back on that history gives us a sense of the numinous at that point,
doesn't it?
But the symbol is the potential for radically reconfiguring your salience landscape.
Yes. So let's jump back here. Symbols are complex. There's many connections of complex unfolding realities, or multifaceted aspects of reality are being drawn together by symbols. So they help us reconfigure our salience landscape by doing so. And he gave us this nice little, what do you call that, acronym, EPIC. So we have the ecstatic
participatory
aspect, the participatory aspect, the interactive, anagage, transformative,
and then the complex,
and then the complexity of symbols. So that spells epic, which is a great
which
acronym.
Is actually a great, and an acronym is a symbol that we use to hold on to, say, many words, but also many meanings as well.
Yeah.
So just that word.
Nice little psychotechnology, those acronyms.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, so they trigger our exaptive capacity to know who and what we are, and then what the world is, and to integrate ourselves with the world in an integrative fashion.
Yeah,
and when we keep saying in an integrative fashion, it's because there's this constant feedback loop that is building
it's
upon itself.
how you're relating to it. And, relating isn't just a one-way street, it's a two-way street. It's the agent-arena relationship, relating.
Yes.
You're opening yourself up into this participation in this world and understanding, into whatever the symbol is, but ultimately symbols are to help understand the world and the nature of things. That's what we use them for. We don't just use them to
and they even trigger anagage, transformative experiences within ourselves that change us. So they are transjective between two worlds at once, the subjective and the objective. They trigger transframing and are thus transformative It's and transframing is just allowing us to frame beyond the typical, how would you say this, polarizing way of looking at things, like it's this or it's that. And this allows you to transcend both kinds of framing and see them happening in a way that can be transformative. So this is how it relates to the sacredness. You can help us break this down pretty well, I think, with mythos.
He made a proposition about the word mythos. So mythos is deeply connected to ritual, which is an interactive analogy.
Or anagage,
analogy, anagage, but it's through patterns of interactions, right? In the symbol, in the symbolic world, there are stories, we've got the mythos, which is connected to stories, which connect back to rituals. So mythos and symbolism together is sacredness. So, or excuse me, a mythos that activates religio to enhance it is sacredness.
That's it. Yes. Mythos is above religio. It activates religio, and that is what sacredness is.
Yes, is the activation of religio.
And so when we're doing rituals, not just like this habitual thing that we're doing that's like rote. It's an inactive, transformative process that we're deeply engaged in, that we're interested in. So there's an inter-essay going on. And this activates the machinery of transformation.
Yeah, and ritual is like, and we learned this from him in a previous episode, but ritual is a very serious play. It's playing, but it's for a very serious reason. It's not just like rough and tumble wrestling or kicking a ball around. Which is play too, but what does interactive wrestling and kicking a ball around do? Well, it helps you sense your body and other bodies into. A ritual helps you come to understanding of much greater things than just your body.
Yeah, like when a symphony plays music, they are playing, but that is quite serious play. Any kind of musician that really spends a lot of time crafting their art.
Oh yeah, I have a lot of fun playing music, but I am a very serious musician. It is what I do.
Yeah, when you're doing, even karate, you're playing through different modes and doing different things, but it's a more serious kind of play. Yeah. So humans do this kind of serious play that allows us to adapt to the world.
Yeah, and
it's absolutely central to our process of. It's what human beings do. It's how we realize and we grow and transform. It's a story and serious plays. That's so deeply enmeshed in our lives.
Already.
I think we're ready to jump back into the final part of this. That catches us up, guys. We're going to jump back in now. This is, once again, Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. If you're enjoying the show, please do smash the like and subscribe, and make sure that you're giving John Vervaeke a like and subscribe and exploring his channel and all the different playlists and videos that he has going on there as well.
To be more accurate, this is Meaning Making 101 with Chris and DJ, covering John Vervaeke's Awakening from the Meaning Crisis
I don't
episode.
think we ever said that.
No, we're calling it Meaning Making 101.
This is DJ. Part of American Dharma Band, and our brother Jesse would be here every night with us, I'm sure, if he could be. But this man has a family, and
he lives like an hour away.
Legit career.
You're only a good 20 minutes up the road. It's a lot easier.
But Jesse's always here with us in heart and spirit, and all of you guys, we thank you so much for joining us on this learning journey. We love you all for being here. Hey, let's go ahead and finish this episode out.
Yes.
We'll get on to our conclusions.
We can activate religio and seriously play with it in order to enhance its capacities for meta-assimilation, meta-accommodation. That's sacredness. That's sacredness. Of course, we can make use of mythos, right, for other things, for other patterns that we care about. We can, of course, our religio is always at work just in our day-to-day interactions with the world. But when we want to activate, accentuate, articulate religio itself, we rely on mythos to do that. Because our relationship to religio is one that can only be born symbolically because of the primordial participatory nature of religio. Now here's something else. Of course, at the core of religio, as I've argued, is relevance realization. And one of the things we know, because of the phenomena of insight and the phenomena of flow, is one of the things that relevance realization is intrinsically interested in is itself. Relevance realization, because it is a self-organizing, self-transcending, self-correcting process. Remember, in insight, you are correcting for a misleading salience pattern, given an incorrect problem formulation. Relevance realization is intrinsically set up to be interested in itself. This is part of its structural design. If your relevance realization machinery is not directed toward to being interested in itself, it's ultimately not a self-organizing, self-correcting, self-developing process, which would mean it would cease to be relevance realization. It is constitutively necessary of relevance realization that it finds itself inherently interesting. So we can find the process. Okay, so this is just deeply valuable to us because it's constitutive of our being in the world. Right? We can use this mythos to activate, articulate, accentuate, celebrate religio. And of course, we find that a deeply interesting thing to do because relevance realization is set up by its evolutionary heritage to be intrinsically interested in itself. And so we are going to find all of this deeply valuable, deeply meaningful. This is the machinery of meaning making, and then we're using mythos to celebrate it and trigger the fact that relevance realization is constituted to finding itself interesting. So what we have is, I think, a way of talking about a lot of the aspects of sacredness. We get the experience of sacredness out of the deep machinery of religio, and when we're using the centrally important machinery of mythos to activate it, accentuate it, articulate it, celebrate it. And that in itself is developmentally important to us. But serious play is the way in which we go through development. But we also find that process intrinsically interesting, like an insight or the flow state, precisely because relevance realization is constituted to reflectively be interested in itself as a process. Now, the question is, yes, okay, maybe all of that's right. Maybe what I'm doing in sacredness is using mythos in order to celebrate and appreciate and accentuate religio. And I'm going to find that valuable because religio is inherently valuable to me, and relevance realization is inherently interested in itself. I get all of that, and I get why this can be so deeply transformative of people and why it can open up their world and open up themselves in this way that feels like making love with reality. But still, you're not getting the essence of sacredness. Because the essence of sacredness is in the sacred. And the sacred, right, takes us back to the metaphysical proposal. The metaphysical proposal is the proposal that what ultimately generates the experience of sacredness is something that is, right, a final, that might be misleading. Something that has an absolute, that's the word I want, value, because it has a particular metaphysical status. Namely, it is supernatural. It is above nature. And its aboveness means that it is always inherently valuable to us, and therefore we will find it sacred because of its absolute value. Now, this carries with it a particular way of understanding the process of meaning making. It's to claim that ultimately, I think that's what people are claiming, that there are things, maybe that's the wrong word, but language is failing me. I'll use this word as neutrally as I can. There are things that are always of relevance to us. What I'm suggesting to you is that this is the claim that there is an essence to relevance. That there is a final formula for being relevant, and that essence inheres in some particular thing, object. And so if I come into the relationship with that object, the relevance, the essence of relevance is inhering in it, and I will therefore find that object sacred. I'm trying to be respectful here, but I think this is ultimately a mistake. The reason why I think it's a mistake is because there is no essence to relevance. There isn't even a thing. There is only the ongoing process of relevance realization. Right? There is nothing other than itself that is intrinsically interesting to relevance realization. And the relevance realization isn't even absolutely interesting to relevance realization because, of course, your salience machinery can actually lead you to kill yourself. You may even find your own existence is no longer relevant or salient to you. So again, to say it's intrinsic, even that is not to say that it's absolute. The notion of sacredness here seems to me to be a category mistake. It seems to me to be saying that there is something, someone, some place that essentially, absolutely, always is relevant. But that is to misunderstand the nature of relevance. It's to confuse the products of relevance realization with the process of relevance realization. And that, of course, is a hallmark of one of the ways in which we make mistakes. We get fixated on the products of our cognition and not paying attention to the process. Let's go back to the Gnostics. Remember that one of the things that their contemporary apostolic Christians criticized them for is that they were constantly inventing new myths in this sense of mythos. because they saw the relationship to sacredness as an evolving one, a deeply transgressive one, a one that was supposed to always be launching you into a trajectory of transframing. Might this suggest another way of understanding sacredness that I think would be respectful to a lot of the texts considered sacred without committing us to or needing the supernatural as a category? Or maybe it's going to mean an ultimate, oh wow, that's so arrogant, sorry. That's not what I want to say. Maybe it means a significant, yes, transformation of what we've ever meant by this term supernatural. I don't know. There's an inexhaustibleness in this whole process. There's a sense in which reality can continue to disclose itself to me. It's inexhaustible. That's ultimately, I think, because of the reality that reality is itself combinatorially explosive. There's an inexhaustibleness to the process of relevance realization, not in the sense that I'm infinite. That's ridiculous. But in the sense that the process is constantly evolving. It is constituted by its evolution. It is not something other than its evolution. What if sacredness is not about finding the completion, the essence, the stabilized final form? What if sacredness is actually an experience of the inexhaustibleness of reality and the inexhaustibleness of the relevance realization machinery in its coupled response to that reality? What does that look like more concretely? Let me give you an example of where you could see these two concretely distinguishing from each other. For me, Plato is sacred. That doesn't mean that I think Plato has some absolute or supernatural value, that he has an unquestionable authority. Plato is, or that my understanding of Plato should be stabilized or finished or complete, right? Instead, what happens is exactly the opposite. I read some Plato and I understand some Plato, I get some insight, and that has an impact on me. And that does all of this to me, and then I go out in the world, and that understanding, in a perspectival and participatory way, transforms me. And I engage, and I become, and the world discloses in a certain way. And after that process, I return to Plato. And then I can see in Plato what I did not see before. I can realize things I did not see before, and those realizations reach deeply into me again. And then again, there's that engagement, there's that transformation. And then I go out in the world. You see how I'm doing the anagogic thing, right? I go out in the world, and the world is disclosed to me in ways I hadn't seen before. And then I go through transformation. I become something different. The world becomes different. At the level of co-identification, agent and arena are being opened up. And then I go back, and when I read Plato, I see something again that I didn't see before. And that has happened to me throughout my life. There isn't some final form there. I'm meaning this very carefully. This is a Gnostic, not in the sense of the two-world mythology or something like that. There's Gnosis here. I am constantly, right, finding Plato to be a fount, an inexhaustible fount of insight, transformation, of an inexhaustible source of transframing of my world and who I am. That's ongoing, that's filled with a kind of developmental wonder for me. I don't think Plato is supernatural. I don't think Plato is absolute. I don't think Plato has the final account. I don't think Plato can give me a final definition of what is relevant. But nevertheless, again and again and again, I get into symbolic resonance with the text. I see through it. And then the world reaches back through it to me. I mean, even Nietzsche has this, right? If you stare long enough into the abyss, it begins to stare back through you. He has a kind of sacredness around that. But it's, of course, open-ended. It's deeply symbolic. Read also Sprach Zarathustra. But as I said, I think it's bound up with a problematic grammar of simply inverting Christianity. I don't want to invert Christianity. That's not what I'm proposing to you at all. I'm trying to suggest to you that the idea I propose to you about what sacredness is can be connected to an alternative proposal of what the sacred is. The sacred is the transjective relationship between the combinatorially explosive nature of reality. The reality is ultimately a no-thingness, that ultimately it is not a thing that you can frame. Reality will always transcend your framing. That's what combinatorial explosion says. And this is, right, linked to the no-thingness of yourself. The I that can never be captured, the framing that can never be captured in the frame, the ongoing, never-ending, not in you particularly, but as a process, right? It doesn't come to a completion, is what I meant by never-ending. Process of relevance realization. There's a deep non-logical identity, a deep symbolic resonance between these two. I think it's what a lot of the mystics were talking about. This is a deep participatory identification. The inexhaustibleness of reality and the inexhaustibleness of relevance realization are deeply, deeply coupled at the primordial levels of religio. This is the sacred as this, the inexhaustible that powers the experience of sacredness in a deeply, profoundly participatory fashion. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Meow, 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 meow. Meow. Ruff, ruff, ruff. Meow. Ruff, ruff, ruff. Meow. Ruff, 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 ruff.
Mew.
Meow.
Or what my dad's cat does.
Really?
Oh, yeah, dude. You know, I'll stay over there sometimes and she'll just get, hair in her butt at 4 o'clock in the morning and leisurely walk down the stairs because she's an old lady. And then she'll just, and it's just like, Rosie, shut up. And comes over. And I'm like, dude. And you throw a pillow at her and she moves to the side and then gets on the pillow. And you're like, shut up, go upstairs. And then she goes upstairs and does it upstairs.
Someone else.
Oh, I love that cat. But yeah,
to
speaking of meows and
instead
stuff.
of meow, huh?
Yeah, but then he's taking care of this. Like, it's an outdoor cat that was abandoned, but it's like super friendly, but doesn't like to come inside or anything, named Mr. Ed. And he does the
Mr. Ed.
meow, meow. And you just hear it through the door because he likes to just watch you through the glass door. Meow. So that's where I got that meow from, was Mr. Ed.
Nice.
That's my ending meow, is Mr. Ed. Shout out to Mr. Ed. He's a dirty orange tabby. Super sweet, but he's kind of weird about being petted. He wants to be petted, but he can't quite do it. So you got to like get in there before he realizes it. And then he's like, oh yeah, this thing. I love it.
Cute.
So,
right,
mythos activates, celebrates, appreciates, amplifies religio through the symbol.
Yes, it does. Yes, we can use mythos to further articulate the religion.
Articulate as well.
Yes, all of these A words. It's intrinsically relevance realization, which religio helps improve. is intrinsically interested in this self-organizing, self-correcting, self-transcending, self-transformation to further better employ itself.
Yeah, so it's literally self-interested, but not in the
Yes.
not in the negative sense that we
No.
use self-interested for.
No.
It's like its very
I took
nature is
this-
interested in what it does in itself.
I took this as it's in a constant interesse
Yeah.
with itself to further
Yeah.
the self-transformation and improve the capacity for relevance realization.
And mythos is interesting.
Yes,
It-
it very much is. So it helps provoke interest.
Well, we love myths, we love backstories, we love the mythos, the reasoning, the practices, the cultures of things. Like we find that very interesting. And
Yes. So mythos, like Game of Thrones, Walking Dead, all these things are like myth-like. So mythos to enact the religio as the machinery forever improving our meaning-making capacity.
yeah,
It's intrinsically interesting to us because it's improving its own functionality. So the essence of relevance then, however, would be in the sacred. And here's the metaphysical proposal. The essence of relevance is in the sacred. Now, what is the sacred?
well, that's the proposal.
That's the proposal.
Yeah.
What ultimately generates the experience of sacredness is something that has an absolute value because it is supernatural. It is above natural.
Yeah, it has a metaphysical status which is supernatural.
Yes, beyond nature.
So-
it has an absolute transcendent higher value.
So what is sacred, or what is sacred because of its absolute value?
Yes.
That's the
It's
proposition.
Inexhaustibleness, absolute, ultimate value.
So you could say there are things that are always of relevance to us, but so this is the claim that
There's an essence.
there is an essence to relevance that adheres to a particular thing or object,
a particular object, place, thing.
So or practice, but this proposal may be a mistake because there is no essence to relevance, like what we were talking about. Relevance has no essence because in order to have an essence, you must find what is relevant within that essence. Relevance is what do you call it? Relevance is self-referential,
Yes.
like repeatedly self-referential, and it is before any moralistic, spiritual, anything else which you find relevant.
That's right.
You get all these things out of finding something relevant, the realization of the relevant thing.
The fact that we...
And relevance can be different. It could be, depending on your circumstance. If you have to pee, the bottle is better to pee in. Whereas if you're thirsty, the bottle is better if it's filled with water. So there is no essence to what is relevant.
No.
If
But
you
the fact that we can define what is relevant to us and recognize that it transcends any one object, place, or thing. And if this is the essence of what, or relevance realization is what ultimately generates the experience of sacredness, then it's like we are in a reciprocal relation with the sacred itself. It is what gives us this conscious awareness that can't even recognize relevance in the first place. Remember when we learned that you need to have an autopoietic being to recognize relevance. And this is the trouble that they're running into with AI, that it's not actually self-aware. It's not autopoietic. We are somehow. And we've gotten all the way down to the bottom now, the sacred. There's something absolute and transcendent that we somehow can relate with that moves through us. This is so deep. So there's the mistake here, of course.
Before the mistake, though, with relevance realization, there is no thing other than itself to relevance realization. So there's an intrinsicness, but not an absoluteness.
That's right.
So relevance is intrinsic to relevance realization, but it's not an absolute. There's no absolute end.
Yeah.
Or there's not an absolute thing either.
No, but it does have an absolute value because it is supernatural.
Yeah. So
it's like an inexhaustible fount.
So Vervaeke makes a claim, a postulation that the notion of sacredness seems to be a category mistake, confusing the products of relevance realization with the process.
The process with the product, yes. Because there is no essence. It's just an ongoing process of or relevance realization. That is, like you said, an ongoing self-referential process. So it's self-improving. It's a feedback loop with itself. We can confuse that process with product. And the Gnostics were trying to figure out how to understand this, so they constantly invented new myths because they saw the relationship with the sacredness as their relationship
as an evolution.
With it as an evolution.
Yes, a constant evolution.
Yes. And so another way that we can understand this that takes it further is that there's an inexhaustibleness, a way that reality continually reveals itself to us and we constantly reveal itself to it, and in that mutual reciprocal relation. This is like the process of evolution itself,
and that very well may be the other absolute,
right?
Like if you would, because we're looking for another absolute, so a new transframing of sacredness is what we need. So there may be another absolute in this inexhaustible process. Theoretically would be the absolute, and that's, well, you can't get more absolute than continuously going.
That's right.
That's
and
bigger
that's
than the biggest. That's longer than the longest.
That's what Vervaeke is pointing to. It's not about finding a final form. It is about an experience of the inexhaustiveness, because God is infinite.
Yes.
God is the absolute. It's the immeasurable. It would never have a final form. Every single time that we try to box God in, we start having wars, and we're saying, this is the way it is. This is the way it is. But it's greater. It's too much, infinitely greater than that for us to ever nail it down completely, nor should we. So here we are. What if it's not about finding the final form? It's an experience of the inexhaustibleness of reality itself and our capacity through being autopoietic beings, through relevance realization, to be in relation with and grow and transcend by.
Yeah.
This is the dance with the divine.
Yeah.
It's increasing our co-identification with all of reality in a reciprocal relation where we're feeding back in. It's like in the Kabbalah idea of how God is the bestower and we are the vessel of reception. And God is giving us the gift of reality and experience, and we are receptors receiving as vessels that experience of reality, but we can complete the circuit by bestowing our unique individual experience back unto source as like an offering. This is my unique experience of what you gave me. Thank you so much. And then you're in a reciprocal dance with it. And that's such a profound notion. I love that.
So I have a little note here. He didn't exactly say this, but he kind of said this is, to be sacred does not need to be sacred does not need to be the be all end all. Like, in order to be sacred, it doesn't have to be the all and the everything, the last thing.
Yes. There's no final form.
And we reach through the sacred to touch the world, and the world touches us back through the sacred.
Yes.
And that gives you that very profound remembering, the sati remembering, but also placement within the agent arena relationship.
Yes, a oneness experience.
The realization of the interaction and coevolution of the agent in the arena as well.
Yes.
And so sacred isn't just this, look at this stone, people say this thing is worth, sacred and whatever. No, if you're going to have, like, say, an idol for the sacred, it gets you into the process of it, just like a flag or something else, like, the little Buddha sitting there isn't, like, oh, that little Buddha that I bought off of eBay for $17.99 with a little ruby in his belly button isn't the, like, I'm not saying that's the sacred thing. It's like, no, but looking at it and the participatory experience you have with, bringing in all of your subsidiary understandings into this one thing, focusing on it, then getting realizations out of it, and then tell you more about your your I don't want to say preconceived notions, but your pre-information coming in. So you can have a sacred object, but it is a symbol to help get you into that space.
Yeah,
so
it's not an exact representation
it's a part
of ultimate reality.
It's a part of the it's a way for mythos to help enhance religio in order to get you into this space. So that's why we have this torture device in churches. This is why we have the cross. The cross. And this is also why we have like, you've got mandalas That process means something. It's not just the thing you do to meditate and make something look cool. The process means something.
And it's just like Vervaeke was telling us with breath. It's also showing us the impermanence of life, because as soon as you're done with that mandala, that beautiful
or if you
intricate design
accidentally
that took you
sneeze
days
or,
to create, it's just gone. You just wipe it away then. So, and that's to help us exercise our capacity for surrender and letting go. That mandala art form is beautiful.
So the sacred.
So I was thinking about this. That there are infinite paths to the mountaintop. Is what we're seeing here. The sacred can be found in many places, and it does indeed. We help us to see through, because we see through the world sees through us, and that further informs the dance. And that's like the juxtaposition of how Nietzsche said, if you look into the abyss, then the abyss looks into you. That's the horror side of the numinous there. So here's the alternative proposal that Vervaeke provides. Sacred is a transjective relation with the combinatorially explosive nature of reality and the no-thangness of self. So it's a relation that transcends the objective or subjective, combinatorial explosion with the combinatorial explosive nature of reality. Combinatorial explosive means that there's
too many options that just keep opening up the more you look at.
Yes. So this helps us to narrow in through relevance realization into a relation with that ever more optimal relation with that reality, and with the no-thangness of ourselves. So the no-thangness is pointing to the fact that when you say the word I, you can never tell what it refers to. It's just like a sense of awareness.
The no-thingness, that is not a thing you can frame.
That's
so
right.
The sacred is, sacred helps you deal with things that can't have a frame readily put around it either.
Yeah.
It's deeply participatory, and it's not a noun, it's a verb. The sacred is a verb as well.
It is, yeah.
So the mind is a verb. Sacredness,
and the I is a verb
quality
too.
of a verb, which is the sacred. Yeah.
And what is that I? Because the no-thangness of self. When we say the term I or me, well, I can say I am happy, I am sad, I am like this.
But
I am
you're
like
saying
that.
this one, like this body. But what does that mean beyond that?
No, it's deeper than that. Yeah, it's not just saying this body. It's saying I. This awareness, but what is this awareness? If I say, because I have a personality, right? I have a personality, and you look at the etymology of the word personality, personage, cast image, front, that these terms, these metaphors that we use for personality. So we all have personalities, but we are not our personalities, because who is the I that has the personality? If it has no traits, because you can chop off my arm, and I'm still me. You could keep on chopping off things, blah 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 blah.
Well,
keep
that's
going, and,
that's
and,
where
it's still I.
Like remember how
what is the I?
Jadu Krishnamurti, when he was referring to himself like I have an upset stomach, he would use I. But then when he's referring to his verb, his doing, it's the speaker as well. So we tend to use I for many different
self-designation.
things. But instead of say, oh, I hurt, it's my body hurts.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And then that leaves it open for the I somewhere behind there is still there, even without the body. It's like, well, my body's missing.
This is the question of where is consciousness happening in the brain, and then we find out that it's almost transcends what the brain does somehow. We can't locate it in any one place. Like, even as we track down one of the most singular aspects or telling aspects, you could say, of consciousness, our capacity for relevance realization, we can't find it. It's in any one part of the brain. We checked and looked with Vervaeke. There's no module. There's no particular part that is dedicated to actuating or relevance realization. It's many different parts working together in conjunction.
Yeah. Constantly evolving and exapting themselves as well.
Yeah.
Because as you grow, your sense of, say, I-ness also changes.
Yeah. And so sacred, the transjective relation with the combinatorial explosive nature of reality, it's like the divine looking through us, actuating itself in a constant recursive dance, in a constant feedback loop. It's growing, it's constant creation, it's evolution itself, and we're deeply, intrinsically engaged with that process. We're not separate from that process. We think of ourselves as separate beings, but we're actually...
Well, and there's a utility to being able to make a separate distinction from many different things, to have that separate eye looking at the universe. There's a utility to that, even though it may not be the entirety of what is.
Well, if you were God and you were unfolding, if you created reality and you were playing out the infinite potentials that could happen, everything that could ever happen, so you need this interplay of opposites: hot, cold, light, dark, happy, sad, all of those things. But to have an original experience of your love through which you create self-aware aspects of yourself that have forgotten what they were. They're going to experience love originally, and all the different shades and textures and situations that we utilize love in, and that we cultivate love through, and how it enables and deepens our sense of wisdom and all of that. It's like it's telling the story of what love is. And I love that idea in Christianity that God is love. You find this at the bottom of many different spiritual traditions. Ultimately, it keeps coming back to this: love is the closest word we have for this.
Well, at least the ones that have sticking power and actually help the people that practice it. There are, I'll call them like pseudo religions that are just spiteful inversions of some type of Christianity or
non-theistic
Abrahamic,
religions, right?
That are, like even, like say like, like Satanism or Luciferianism. They're pseudo religions that just invert things,
or Marxism,
and
cultural Marxism,
and it doesn't reproduce or stick around because it doesn't actually provide any.
It's a lot of the buttons
value and insight into
doesn't
how
give
the
you
world
an
is.
actual sense of oneness.
And it doesn't go
doesn't
up.
help you.
It doesn't go up and out.
Self-transcend and improve the life of yourself and others around you. And it's utilize just brutality to achieve its ends. You can see that we talked about this earlier. We can be possessed by our ideologies, our belief systems, and so much so that we can try and force them into play, and that just doesn't work. That's counter to the point of what the sacred seems to be attempting to enact through us.
Mm-hmm. And you can't just forget about the sacred either. That's like,
no,
because there's always going to be some sort of pull or draw that's going to draw you into whatever portion of yourself has the need and craving for the sacred. You're just going to replace it with something else.
Yeah.
And not saying there aren't other things to replace it with that may be functionally,
useful in some
ways. But to just deny it seems to be, like running from a boil on your ass. It's there and it's on you.
That's right. There cannot be a final form. There's got to be an ongoing growth process, room for this idea of God and the sacred to ever improve and tell itself. So the ongoing, never-ending story of relevance realization is what we seem to be engaged in. And Vervaeke notes there's this deep, non-logical identity and resonance of participatory relation. What he's talking about there is the intrinsic sense of oneness that we can all experience through higher states or altered states of consciousness. That deep non-logical identity. So there's no logical account for this. But there is a sense of resonance of participatory relation with the whole. The exhaustibleness of this, of whatever it is that powers the experience of the sacred, is the metaphysical proposal that Vervaeke just totally curveball threw at us. Because this whole time he's making this secular argument, but now we find ourselves coming full circle. It's a secular argument for the value of the religio.
Well, there's definitely a need for the religio, and I don't mean
and a sense of the sacred
societally, but for the individual.
Yes, a communal relation with our sense of the sacred and a celebration of that sense of the sacred.
Yeah, because if we get rid of it and don't participate in it, we get ourselves into the situation that we are in right now, which is very nihilistic, confusing, ever unfolding into a bunch of nonsense.
Yep, because we need the most deeply compelling reasons for goodness and for love. And if there is no meaning to anything, then it's just as reliable a survival technique to go out there and rob and cheat and steal. Well, why not? If there's no meaning to anything, there's no God and there's no good or bad, and it's all subjective, then why not just screw everyone over?
The logical thought process also in the end of that would be, well, if there's no meaning to anything and none of this matters, then why don't I just kill myself?
That too, right?
And take as many people out with me just to make some type of physical point so that people remember. Because if there is nothing other than our physical lives, the only way I can be remembered is making the biggest splash possible on my way out.
Yeah.
It's the mentality of, mass shooters that commit suicide by mass shooting.
Yes.
I'm nihilistic. I don't care. People have hurt me. I'm going to hurt them, and I'm going to leave an impact as much as possible. When you read
their manifestos, you see exactly that.
Yeah. Yes. I had this is kind of a side, but it kind of fits in. I had a thought about, those who wish to live forever. Those who wish to live forever wish to live forever because they know when they die they're going to hell, one way or another, or they fear they're going to hell. And all the stories of like the bad guys and the elites that want to live forever, they're hollow husks of what they once were, and that's the theme with living forever. You're a hollow husk of what you once were, and the only thing you have left to wear and bear is your own sins and lackings, if you will. So the urge to live forever is the fear of the punishment you're going to get for the hollow nature.
You're afraid of the void.
Existence.
You're addicted to constantly filling the void with sensory pleasures that are ever increasingly outlandish and warped, you could say.
So this is a quote I came up with myself. Feel free to use it. But those who wish to live forever wish to live forever because they know they're going to hell.
I like that, man. That's insightful.
And not just fear they're going to hell, but know. Because if you fear you're going to hell, you'll try to do better. But if you know you're going to hell, you're like, well, then might as well live forever and just keep doing what I do.
Is their mind?
Well,
when they
you're already in hell, bud, and you're going to be there forever if you live forever, right?
Because they're constantly trying to avoid their mind. They don't want to approach the void or anything that has stillness because they're afraid of their own mind that will appear then. And they'll be haunted by all that they've done. So they're constantly just distracting themselves with more and more sensory material pleasures and lustful gratifications.
I couldn't think of anything more punishing than living forever without a true appreciation of the sacred. And one thing that also, for me personally, that makes this world and this experience sacred is because you only get it once and it doesn't last forever.
Yeah. Yeah, a rose is only beautiful because it dies.
Yeah.
It doesn't last forever. No. It's transitory. So it's special. It's extraordinarily special because it's here and it's now for a little while.
Well, and
it's glorious and there's nothing like it.
Like being a parent, the beauty of having a child in that experience is really enhanced by the fact that they're not going to be kids forever and you're going to have to watch them grow out. So you have to really enjoy that experience.
So it peaks the value of those moments. Yeah. How cool is that? So here we are in the midst of this meaning crisis, and I find ourselves grasping at and actually catching a deeper and deeper connection. And we're finding the meaningfulness that is deep and rich in every particle and pixel of reality around us as we journey through this wisdom series with John Vervaeke. Awakening from the meaning crisis is the goal of this series that he's presented to us, that he's shared with the world, put out for free. It's too long a lecture series to put in any one university, and he knew it was for the people anyway. So here it is, and we're so thankful to have you all here with us, learning together, because how else are we going to do this? We need to figure this stuff out together and learn how to actuate it together, and we're going to require cognitive distributive networks, ever-increasing cognitive distributive networks. That means many minds working together to solve this meaning crisis. So here we are, guys. Thank you all so much for being here. I've been Chris.
I've been DJ.
We'll see you guys next time, Wednesday, 8 p. EST. Make sure you like and subscribe and pass those likes and subscribes on to Mr. Vervaeke as well. Share the show with your friends and family if you enjoy. And you're always welcome to listen to this podcast on Spotify, Apple, Google, Stitcher, all the podcast places. And thank you guys for tuning in. Love you.